So we've had a bit of a problem. I don't know if I'm actually on now. Going to wait for Joe to message me to see. I've been sat there chatting away to myself for half hour thinking it's going to work in a minute. Let's see. Yes, I can see numbers. I told you, didn't I? I'm absolutely rubbish with technology. Yes, we got some people on. We're working. Uh, yeah, I'm on. I can't believe that. I've literally been sat here for half an hour thinking, well, I'll sit down, I'll tie some rigs up, I'll have a chat about white acres and stuff like that, because that's what I've got coming up. Um, Thinking, maybe people are eating their dinner. It's a bit sort of like, 6 o'clock as such. Some people don't get back to work till quite late. I just cannot be trusted. When it comes to this stuff, I do not have a clue. Look at Grant, he's laughing his head off. So I'm going to put this up here. You're right, John. So look, this is what I get. This is what happens, see, when Barry leaves me alone. You're right, John. This is what happens when Barry leaves me alone with technology, because I've gone on it just genuinely thinking it just says go live. So I pressed that and I thought, well, sound is counting down. I'm live. Everything's working all right. And then basically, you won't be able to see it, but on my little screen, it's got like a little eyeball thing and it says that people are watching. And it was obviously saying 0. So this is Baz ringing now, but I'll just tell him, you're right, dude, I've done it wrong. So I've been chatting away to myself for half hour, but we've got it sorted. So I'm all right. But I'll give you, yeah, I'm on now. So I'll give you a ring when I'm done. Yeah, I'm on the website. Yeah, people are commenting. So sound. Cheers, Bazza. See you in a bit. Bye, mate. This is what happens, see? If he leaves me to it, I'm absolutely bobo. So I'm going to turn that off. I don't need that now. There was a couple of questions messaged, so I might have to pick it up just so I remember. So yes, look at Alex is here. Look, this is what I get. To some people, this might seem so easy, but I have not got a clue. There's Grant. Where would you be without Joe? It don't even bear thinking about, Grant, to be honest. So John's happy because he managed to get on, which is nice, because again, look, see, I've had John managed to get on and yet I can't get on myself. Clueless. Right, so Grant, Grant, I could leave him chatting away to himself. So, yeah, you could have done. I'd have been quite happy sat here just talking to myself. Do you know the best thing about when you're talking to yourself? No one tells you to shut up. No one looks at you as like when she looks at you when you're talking about fishing. It's just like, that's the look I get. So yes, we are sorted. So I tell you what, before I do these questions, there was 2 that someone messaged me. So I'm going to do these and then I'm going to do them, because otherwise I'm going to forget. So one of them I screenshotted. This is how bad I am. So that's Dermot. No, we're on Dermot. So let me go back. So Jason Gilbert messaged about he's rubbish, just like me with technology. He's not got a clue, so he don't know how to get onto it to ask questions. So me and Jason are good friends. We're both rubbish. Line length for shallow fishing at Westwood, short or long? That's a brilliant question. It's something I did definitely want to talk about, because when I was at Westwood, even though it's absolutely solid with fish, using a long line makes a massive difference, like a ridiculous amount of difference, to be honest. And when I went there, I drew very well, to be honest, especially when I was on Swallow. 5 and 6 of the pegs, and I drew peg 5. I've got to tell you this. Some of you might have known this anyway because of me match reports, but it was Tony Evans's festival, so he done the draw live on Facebook, and I think this is contagious. This is right. So Tony must be absolutely crap at technology like me, because he's tried to do the draw live on Facebook and it's not worked. And he actually drew me peg 6. I was one of the first to come out. And he's like, oh no, it ain't worked. So I'm gonna have to just do a redraw. Paul's going to be gutted when I tell him that he's drawn peg 6 on Swallow and I've had to redraw him a peg. Anyway, you redrew me the better peg, which is peg 5. So yeah, it's not always bad to be good. It's not always bad to be bad at technologies, because I've got a right peg out of that. But anyway, yeah, back onto the line length limit makes a massive difference, especially when you're catching them quite shallow at times. So that was a classic example when I was at Westwood, having a long line. But what's important is having your back shots close to your front flow and using the right amount of back shots. Because I just remember one day, it might have been when I was on Swallow actually. So even though I'm only using a tiny little dibber, so I think I'd use this dibber, but it'd be a number 2 one. So that's just a little number 1 RW dibber. So the number 2 one, it doesn't take a lot of shot, only takes sort of 2 number 10s. So it's quite a light little flow. But even with 2 number 8 back shots, I'd say sort of an inch, just maybe over an inch from your flow. As soon as I put another number 8 back shot, when you slap your rig over, lift up so your float like lands, and then you lift your back shot up and your float just pops, and then you get a buy, but because you've got your back shot nice and close to your float, just pulls your elastic out every single time. So yes, a long line makes a massive difference. Going to gold, my last few matches on the middle lake, it's made a massive difference. And again, Andy won the fishing, or well, he actually qualified at Lindholm using a long line rig. I think that's where it stemmed from a few years ago, where the long line rig, I think it was Sam Slockett who first put, and this is why it's good to stay with people that you can learn a lot of. Sam was on Benny's, and again, that lake is absolutely solid with them. And there's the clay pit at Western Pools. And even though you're catching really shallow, he was using a long line jigger, basically slapping his rig over, holding it, going to feed. And because his pole tip's so far away from the water, he was just lowering it down, and they're just pulling the elastic out dead shallow. And he was like, right, well, they're there now. Go out on your normal short line or shorter line fixed rigs. You don't get by. So he's gone back on his long line jigger rig and caught one a chuck. And he done the same when he was on Benny's. So that's why it's nice. You learn little tiny things like that make a massive difference. And then for the rest of the week, when we was on Laurels, I won the lake, Andy won the lake, Sam won the lake, all using that long line rig. Andy qualified on Willers using a long line shallow rig. And then he went and won the fishing or final, again from a not favoured area, fishing with a long line rig. And someone said that you're watching everyone else and they're striking and missing bars, whereas Andy said that like every one of them is pulling his elastic out, and it's more with your back shots as well. So yes, long line shallow rig, Jason, makes a massive difference. It's just learning to be able to slap your rig, and you want your back shots close to your flow. That's the art to it. That's what you've got to practice. So that was one question. The second question that I had, obviously some of our subscribers, they're fishing the Subscriber Classic at Tunnelbaum Farm on Friday. Now, I haven't been for a while, but looking at the results, I went there and done some filming with Guru. Personally, if I was going there, I'd look where possible to start across with hard pellets, probably about 2.5 foot, roughly that sort of depth. I think if you're on club 2, set up almost 3 rigs. If it's, as a rough idea, if it's 4 foot down the middle, you want like 2 and 2.5 foot. If it's 5-6 foot down the middle, you want 2.5 foot and 3 foot across. I'd probably use a 4x10 Maggies, and just literally I'd start across, just tapping a few hard pellets in, 4 mils, with a 4 or 6 mil on the hook. A 4 mil can be really good on the hook, so don't discount that. Even if you're getting signs, it's amazing the difference between a 4 mil pellet and a 6 mil pellet. So I'd start doing that. If I was in open water, say on house, where I've just got open water, I'd start short on hard pellets. Then I'd take some micros, a few formula expanders for the hook as well, for in the edges, maybe a bit of ground bait and a handful of worms for the hook, especially if you're on new. There's some areas where, and again on canal, especially the high numbers of canal, you can catch really well in the edge. So in the edges, I'd probably look to fish maybe 2 lines, to be honest. I'd feed 1 in 2.5 foot one side of me, 2.5 foot, and I'd feed some loose ground bait, throw live maggots on it. And then in the other side, in the edge, I'd probably try and find, I'm going to say about 18 inches roughly, if you can find it, and maybe feed some micros. Just throw some little balls of micros with an expander on the hook. That could be good. If that doesn't work, you can obviously feed some ground bait in it and maybe fish with a big worm on the hook, especially if there's a few carp. And then fishing down the middle, personally, I'd just opt to fish with live maggots. Now, you might just catch them well on the bottom, and that's what you've got to work out on the day. But there will be areas where you will catch an odd and shallow. Again, talking about that rig, that long line shallow rig, a little flow, you know, like a little, make sure you set up like that. Is my little 4B8 Winter Maggie. It's actually busted. It's not made for fishing for F1s. I broke it at the weekend. But you want that type of float for fishing, I would say between 12 and 18 inches deep. And then for shallower than that, sometimes they will come shallower than that, especially on high pool. Then set up sort of your little dibber rigs, you know, just your normal shallow rigs. So your little, like, you know, dibber rig for like 12 inch and less. Probably opt for like a number 1, number 2 RW dibber. Again, on house, it could be quite good. Again, don't ignore fishing an overshot rig, especially on high pool. If there's a lot of little blips and stuff, that can work really, really well on high pool. But I'd be going there with that sort of attitude, you know, fish across to start with, prime up down the middle, throw some bait in the edges. On new pool, definitely feeding some ground bait, sort of 2.5 foot. Try and find where it's flat, anywhere where you can get in the edge and it's sort of 2.5 foot, but it's a flat bottom. Pot some ground bait. I just use like Commercial Masters pole mix or that type of mix, match method mix, you know, not a too strongy fish meal ground bait. I'd probably pot sort of maybe, you know, 200 milligram bait, throw a few live maggots. If you drop in on it and it's an odd little blip on that, just feed another 200 milligram bait, because that can be really, really good, especially if they're not coming shallow and it's a bit too deep to catch them on the bottom. That's sort of that perfect intermediate line. Again, distance is really important when you're doing that. Personally, I like fishing a short kit, short for my 5, and roughly either the end of my 5 or halfway down my 6, somewhere where I can throw my bait nicely. So just bear that in mind as well. So hopefully that answers your questions. But yes, I would personally go down the live maggot route. So, right. Yes, I'm buzzing we're on. I'm buzzing that we fixed it. So we got some more questions. So, being a good boy. And that's the other one. Ribena. I quite like Ribena. It's nice. So, can move all my rigs out of the way that I was tying. I'm thinking, nah, maybe they're all eating dinner. So, I'm glad we got it fixed. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up a little bit. So, where are we? Here we are. Right, so we're at the top, going down. So our first question is from Joe Farley. Hi, Paul. What floats do you use for shallow fishing on the pole? So I use a few, Joe. For F1s, I like starting off with a dibber. So I've got my little dibbers there. So I'm just going to pop some of these out just so we can see it nicely. So for maggots, for F1s personally, that's the float that I like using, a little number 1 RW dibber. The reason being, it's a dead little light float and it doesn't take a lot of shot, only takes 2 number 11s. And that's really, really nice. When you're fishing sort of 12 inches and less, a lot of the time the fish, they've gone from this heavy slab where it's like blosh, blosh, blosh. They don't like it. It lands too heavy, and if anything, it spooks them. So a tiny little light dibber, especially when you're fishing maggot shallow for F1s, when you slap it, it almost doesn't make any noise, and that's what you want. So I use that one, and that takes basically 2 number 11s with my maggots. That's perfect. And then if I was fishing casters or sort of 4mm pellets, then I just use number 2 version, and that takes basically 2 number 10s. So if I was fishing with casters, 2 number 10s down the line's perfect. But if I was going to fish sort of a hard 4mm or a hard 6mm, more hard 4mm pellets, to be honest, then I just put 2 number 11s down the line, just counteract the weight of that 4mm pellet. Then the next float I'd look to use, which is this one, which is just an RWF1 shallow, little carbon stem diamond float, and it's just got 1.5mm bristle. And that's perfect, again, when you're fishing with maggots, casters, anywhere between, I would say, 14 inch and maybe down to about 2 foot. Then after that, the float that I like using is this, basically. It's my little Winter Maggie float, little RW float. And I like them in 2 sizes, a 4B8 and a 4B10. So if I feel like I'm fishing say 2 to 2.5 foot, then I'd opt for a 4x10. But if I want to use a light float, a bit like what I was talking about on Middle Lake, just gone, even though I'm catching between say 10 inch and 18 inches deep, that little dib is perfect when they're sort of up to 12 inch. But that F1 shallow takes sort of 3 number 10s and a number 11 shot. Whereas my little 4B8 Winter Maggie, that only takes, I would say, 5 number 12 shot when I'm using maggots on the hook, or casters, banded caster. But if I want to use a 4mm pellet, I can just take one of my number 12s off. But that flow is unbelievable, the difference it makes and how many bites you get. So yes, float makes a massive difference. Like if you just said to me, I would say maybe in the last sort of 2 years, what floats you use for F1 shallow, I'd just say those two. Whereas now I'm using that Winter Maggie more and more, and I'm using a longer line more and more. It's not like I'm setting up all my normal rigs, which I always do. I just find that I'm using that float because I just get so many more bites on it. Now, when it comes to carp fishing, it's a little bit different. So for me slapping rig, the float I use is, again, it's exactly the same, that little diamond float. If I put it here, it's exactly the same as that diamond float, the F1 shallow, but this one's a carp shallow. Carp slapper, I think it might be called, and they come in 2 sizes, a smaller one and a bigger one. And if I'm fishing with say 6mm pellets, then you could use a short line, you could use the smaller one. But if I'm using sort of an 8mm pellet or a longer line, excuse me, I've drunk too much appetizer, I like this one, which is the bigger version, but it's exactly the same float, it's just got a 2mm bristle. So that's the float I'd look to use when I want to use maybe up to say a short line up to maybe 3 foot above the float. That's perfect, especially with an 8mm, because and I like using a bristle float. It's just so much nicer. It's easier to be able to see your signs and that. Now, if I was fishing a little bit deeper, then instead of using my Winter Maggie rig, what I use is this float, which is a Maggie. Again, it's exactly the same float, it's just got a different bristle. So that one's got a 1mm, 1.2mm solid plastic bristle. This one has just got a 1.7mm hollow bristle. So it's a 4x12. Again, because I'm going to be fishing for carp, a lot of the time I'm going to use like a 6 or probably even an 8mm pellet on the hook. And that float takes 6 number 9 cubes, but with 5 number 9 cubes and maybe a number 11 for a 6mm pellet, or just 5 number 9 cubes for an 8mm pellet. And that's the float that I'd look to use for a bit deeper than that. The only other float that I'd look to use when it comes to carp fishing is sort of that type of float, so a dibbered float. But I like that when I'm fishing a long line, sort of swinging, mugging rig, where it takes a lot of shot, but it's a short flow because I'm mugging. So I'm looking at seeing the fish and swinging my bait to it. I'm never going to be fishing that deep, literally like no deeper rig. But personally, I find like some people, when they talk about mugging, all my rigs set at 18 inches. That never works for me. I find it, if anything, between 6, I'd say 8 inch is probably the optimum. 8 to 12 inch I find best, to be honest, because I want to be able to swing nicely. And I think you want a short little fat flow that takes quite a bit of shot. So 6 number 8 cubes plus your hook bait to be able to pendulum and swing it out. But those are the different types of floats that I use for shallow fishing for F1s and carp. So hopefully, Joe, that answers your question nicely. Again, quickly touching on, it doesn't happen a lot, what I would call on our UK match venues that we go week in, week out. But when you go to some places that are quite deep, so the High Bank at Match Lake, or where else would be dead deep, Lindholm on the Loco Lake, even there, it's more F1s as such. You don't tend to catch them as well. It's more like jigger fishing, to be honest. But sometimes using, say, a 4B14 or a 4B12 1.7mm Maggie and setting it what I call sort of nipper light, so about 4 foot, that used to work really, really well. So again, the deeper you're fishing, just up your weight afloat, really, more due to the conditions. But I would say like a 4B12, that'd be about spot on, to be honest. 4B12 1.7mm Maggie. So hopefully that answers your question, Joe. So look, see, when I do all of this, like I can click on and off the question. It makes me look dead smart, doesn't it? It makes me look well clever, like I know what I'm doing. I haven't really got a clue. Right, so On to our next question. It's from Grant Clark. Weather question, Paul. I just watched the temperature. So if there's no sudden drops or jumps, Andy mentions monitoring the wind direction and air pressure. What apps do you use and what do you look for? To be honest, for me, weather, before I done Match Focus, the only thing I ever looked at, hand on heart, was um, the wind direction in terms of where it's coming from. So a southwesterly wind or a southerly wind, a westerly wind, that's a warm wind. So in my mind, it's always going to fish better when it's been a warm wind or leading up to it. If it's been a warm wind leading up to it, I always feel like it's going to fish well. Whereas when it's from an easterly wind, east in the least, that's, what all of us been taught. And to be fair, it's pretty much bang on. But a northerly stroke easterly wind, that's a cold wind, and you just feel like it might be a bit sort of difficult. Another thing that I always look out for is the moon phase. So when it's a full moon, normally, again, even when you go out and you look and you think everything looks right for it, and it's been a full moon, sometimes I think, again, that's due to air pressure. But once there's been a full moon, again, I know that can have an effect on the fishing. So I always go there with a little bit like, or I don't know what it's quite going to be like. When it comes to air pressure, to be honest, I do the weather for all of our match reports now to try and see if I can learn something. But hand on heart, I don't feel like I've looked at it and thought, that's sort of like, when you get something and it all sort of makes sense now. I'm looking at it and it doesn't seem to make any sense to me. Truthfully, I don't know. I'm going to keep doing it. The biggest thing I will say, what I've learned in terms of since I've done the weather for our match focus, is more when it comes to our thermometer. Now, at this time of the year, hand on heart, I don't really believe when I'm looking at it and it's 19 at the start, 19.4. What I've learned is on average throughout the warmer months, whatever sort of temperature is, it roughly goes up 1.2 degrees during the day. The only thing I genuinely feel like that I wouldn't be able to fish without now is my thermometer, and it's more for the winter when it comes to my initial feeding on the pole line. So again, I think it's only relevant when you're going to a place regularly. Now, when I go to Gold in the winter time, the thing is it's about the volume of bait you feed at the start. And again, if I went there once and then I went to Tunnel and then I went somewhere else and then I went there and then I went back to Gold, it'd be irrelevant to me. It would make, because the water's fluctuated all of the time. But when you're going somewhere regularly, like I do, especially in the wintertime, because I like it now, or I love it now to be fair, but I love it in the winter because I want to be able to feed. I love the fact that there's pole fishing, waggler fishing, a bit of carp fishing. I really, really enjoy it. And the one thing that I've learned about having my thermometer is if I go there on a Wednesday and say the water temperature is 7 degrees, and I go there on the Saturday and it's 6, I know I can't feed as much. But if I go there and it's 9 degrees, I know that I can feed more. Or maybe I might feed expanders rather than ground bait and live maggots, or I know I can feed. That's what it helps me. So if I fed, say, for argument's sake, 600 milligram bait on Wednesday's match and it was whatever temperature the water was, depending on did I feel like when did the fish arrive? That's one thing at Gold is you can't top up with ground bait. The only time you can top up, I believe, is when a carp's come in your peg, and that's normally game over for the silver. So you can top up to try and get another carp come in your peg. But when you're fishing for them silvers, what happens at Gold? It's really quite a unique venue in the fact that just say I fed 400 milligram bait at the start and then loose fed me live maggots. I might go on it with an hour and a half to go, with an hour and a half gone of the match, and it's absolutely solid. And then all that happens is they've ate me bait, and I'm just loose feeding live maggots, and eventually my peg's just going to peter out to nothing. But if I fed, say, for argument's sake, just say I fed 1200 mil at the start, and I went in after an hour and a half and I didn't get bite, then this is the balancing thing. So I might have fed a bit too much. Just say I went in after 2 hours, no bites. 3 hours, no bites. I know now I've fed way too much. It's taking the fish too long to settle on the bait. What happens at Gold a lot as well is they sit off the back of the bait. So the biggest thing that I can learn in terms of using the actual thermometer is the water temperature, and it helps me massively knowing how much to feed. So if I feel like, oh, I fed, 1,200 mils, a bit too much that day, and then by looking at the thermometer and then looking at the thermometer on the morning of my following match, depending on, again, how well have I drawn? Do I feel like I'm fishing for 20 pounder silvers or 60 pounder silvers? I can make a better educated decision on how much to feed at the start, because I can't top up. And that's one thing I genuinely feel like I wouldn't be able to fish without. But when it comes to air pressure, a lot of people talk about it, and to be honest, hand on heart, I don't look at it like that. I think I just genuinely feel like, again, in our match reports, I try and get that feeling on the day of my experience. So it might be high air pressure and it might fish rubbish. That doesn't mean a lot to me. But when I get there, if it's red hot, flat, bright, it's looking, this ain't going to happen today. It just don't feel right. That might be that might be high air pressure to somebody else, but to me, I get there and just feel like, I don't know, don't look right. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's not a lot of fish blowing, and I'm a big believer in sort of feeling my way into it. I like to sort of, it's really, really difficult to describe, but I try and sort of plug myself in the lake, get a feeling like what's happening here, because it can change. They're in, your 5 hour match, you don't just sit down. If it's good all day. Especially the fishing I've been doing lately. And one thing that I think will be really nice for people to watch is the live match that I done at Gold. So I had a lot of messages from that match in particular. Well done, mate. Is there anyone fishing? Oh, that was a hard match. You only doubled everyone. When you look at the weighboard, that's exactly what it looks like. Whereas when you watch that live match, it won't be anything like you think it's going to be. Because for the first 2 hours, nothing's happening. But I'm getting that feeling. I'm looking around and thinking, this ain't happening. I've missed one bar on a waggler. I don't feel like I'm going to get a bar on it. I want to chuck my bomb on it because, again, I don't feel like I'm going to get a bar on it. I don't want to talk too much about it because I want you to watch it and sort of it makes sense. But I'm feeling my way into it, thinking, God, Baz has only driven all the way down from Middlesbrough to film this. Like, I don't know really what to say to him, and I'm feeling my way into it. But I'm priming that line, priming it, and then all of a sudden, see an odd and starting to mill around, and it's changing. And that's how I like to fish. I don't want to go there with a preconceived, because in the past I used to do that too much. And I think it's important to be present when you're fishing. And I feel like, again, because I'm very analytical, I look at other people and I feel like, what makes them that? And a lot of the people that I look up to and have fished with in the past, people like Andy and William and Des, those three, and probably Steve as well. I haven't fished with Steve Ringer a lot, but again, they've all got it. Is they're very sort of, this has happened now. They're very aware of things, of what's happening, and very adaptable, changing the way of how the fish want it on the day. That's one thing that I try and fish like that. And hopefully in that live match, you'll see just after 2 hours, we've not got a lot in the net. So all of a sudden, the reason we caught a few is because it changed and we changed with it. But whereas when early on, when there's not a lot there, everyone else fresh in the water will find maybe with a waggler. They're never going to sell like that. And it changes all of the time. And that's something that I've done this Sunday as well. Admittedly, I didn't get it all right in terms of my pole fishing. But what I did get right, from where I believe is not the best of areas, because I've almost sacrificed early on, waiting to go on my bomb stroke waggler line when I know there's fish there, because they give themselves away. Just like when you're fishing down the middle with maggots, they give themselves away because they pimp. When you're fishing down the edge, they always give themselves away because they colour up, or you see an odd knock. You know they're there when you go in on it. So personally, trying to answer your question, Asaj, when it comes to weather, I take it when I get there and it's sort of wet, windy and warm, and I look at it and just think, it's going to fish its rats off today. You just get that feeling. It's loud, it's warm, it's noisy. And it's experience. Through my experience, when I've been there and I've done that, I just feel like today, if I was carp fishing, I'd be thinking, right, I'm going to fish a bomb. I'm starting off on the bomb and I'm fishing short pole and I'm fishing in the edge. That wind's, if it's like that, smacking in my face, dead loud, warm, aggressive, noisy, they're going to have a feeder. Whereas I could draw exactly the same peg, you know, there's not a cloud in the sky, there's not a breath of wind, and I just think, I ain't getting a bar on the bottom today. You know, bottom, yeah, I set it up, but unless it changes, that ain't going to be the right method. It's going to be about mugging on the pole, you know, waggler fishing, but then mid feeding is going to be more of a token gesture. Whereas if I feel like it could be a bit of bomb fishing as well, I don't want to overcook my bomb line. That's what I try and do is almost, yes, the weather plays a big part leading up to it. It's, we've had a real cold snap and then it's dead hot, you know, or it's warm, you've got a chance of them coming up and sunning themselves and they don't really want to feed. But personally, I look into it, but it's not the be all and end all as such. I don't pay that much. I try, and the only thing that matters to me is the 5 hours that I'm fishing. And I try and condense, you know, all my efforts into getting that feeling of what's happening right now, and knowing that in 20 minutes time it could be totally different. So that's how I sort of look at it, Grant, and hopefully, you know, that sort of helped answer the way that I think about it. Everyone's different, you know. There's some people that literally, you know, on their phone, they know exactly, like with Andy when he goes to Partridge, because they're canalised lakes and the fish always follow the wind, knowing the wind direction. And again, that's all experience. He knows roughly what it's going to be like. But personally, whenever I go, when I used to go to tunnel, it doesn't seem to matter what way the wind's blowing, it just seems to blow that way. But yeah, I just more on the day. Like one thing that I do as well is the wind might have been blowing a certain way overnight. So some people would say to their, oh, it's blowing a northwesterly, so I know peg such and such and such is going to be quite good. Me, because I'm an early riser and I don't like sleeping before I go fishing, I'm always there quite early. So I'll have a look at the lake. And before anyone's, you know, when people are getting there as such, I just go have a wander around the lake and I look and feel like, well, I know the wind's been blowing down here because this is where all the scum is. And that's how I do it personally. Everyone's different, but I just try and sort of live in that moment in them 5 hours, if you get the gist of what I'm trying to say. But hopefully that helps answer your question. So, Black Country Fisherman, I see you still haven't given your mother get your ways back. Yeah, they're here. I've literally had them for years. The actual set of scales is over there. I should go and grab them for you. I'm going to do it. I'm going to show you it because they are years old. So bless her. These were scales when she used to make us like jam cushions and stuff when we were kids. And these weights here, there used to be a load of them. Now there's one, so I haven't stole the others. But yeah, I stole the big ones. They're absolutely spot on for my rig tying. And to be honest, I wouldn't be able to tie my rigs without them now. So yeah, lovely. So, oh yeah, on to our next question. So, it's a bit of a drink. Evening, Paul. How's the shallow pace fishing going? Any more updates on the rigs from Martin Farrow? So what's happened? Oh, I'll pop that back up. So what's happened at the moment, Martin, to be honest, is where you're getting sort of maybe 20 people at gold, the amount of ground bait you're actually using is quite a lot. So I would say if you're fishing it for 5 hours, I'd want to take 7 kilos of ground bait with me. So what's happened now, unfortunately or fortunately, the problem is with 20 people feeding that, it's a lot of bait, and they're worried about, you know, the water quality, which is fair enough, it's their fishery. So there's a limit now of 5 litres wet, which is not enough bait. It's roughly about 2 kilos, maybe 2.5 kilos. So it's nowhere near enough bait. But the rigs, to be honest, the last video that we ever done, the last mini session, that, in my opinion, was the best way of going about it. Excuse me, fishing a soft paste. And what was important as well was I had these rigs. And again, I will do that video for you because I've got my little pot of bits here. And so I've basically had 3 rigs. So these were the 3. Now, the last time it was allowed, I didn't draw very well, to be honest. So those were the 3 different types of rigs that I used for my pace shallow. So the first one, which is this big bulbous one, That one just sort of bobs, and when it goes under, obviously you can catch them. That middle one was quite nice, to be honest. But one thing that I found when, found it by accident, to be honest, was this rig, the middle one, actually sunk one of them, because you can see how old they are and battered they are. When I was using my soft paste, it's a lot bigger than obviously my stiff paste. So my middle rig actually sunk, and an overshot paste rig, it was ridiculous, absolutely unbelievable. So the last time I went, I actually tied up some number one RW dibbers, because you have to have a float on a gold, and tied them sort of as an overshotted paste rig. Now, the last time I drew there, when I drew, it's not the best, to be honest. And in that little area, it never really happened in the 70s. So when I went there, I fished pellet shallow. I think I had £130. Again, feel like I learnt loads, but that was definitely the better approach. And then the following weekend, I missed the match because it was Andy's final. And that was where I think the ground bait limit was introduced. And then my last match, with it being 5 litres of ground bait, where I just don't feel like you've got enough to be able to do it properly, and with it cooling down a little bit. So unfortunately, excuse me, that just seems to be the end of the paste stroke slop shallow fishing. They might relax the rule, excuse me, and reevaluate it a little bit. But when you've got such a limited amount of bait, it's something where you're going to do it and then you're just going to run out of bait. So personally, I'd rather, the thing is as well with gold is a method feeder can work well. So if I go there with my limit of ground bait and make it all a slop and throw it in and it doesn't work, it's not like I'll have some more ground bait for a method. I haven't really got that bait. So with my limit now, what I'd rather do is feed some ground bait on me long pole line and loose feed pellets on it. That seems to be the better way, most consistent way of going about it. I haven't drawn where I believe it's the best bit yet in the 90s. But last weekend's match, again, these match reports will be out this week. I had £130 and I must have had 90, 100 F1s, but they were all little tiny ones. I've definitely had 100 fish. Normally I count the weight, so it's like that's £2, that's £1, so I've got £3, £4, £6. That's how I do it in my net. I go just over £30, £6 net limit. I haven't got to worry. So even if I'm well out, then I'm still going nowhere near my net limit. But this week it was like £1, £2, £3, £4, £5, £6. It's like, am I going to catch it? And I didn't catch any better fish. So I had a load of fish, but again, I still feel like I've got a lot of things to learn about rigs using that winter Maggie. There's definitely a better way of doing it because I'm still missing a few too many bites for my liking. But that's something that we need to learn and improve on. But I just feel like you have to feed ground bait on your pole line. Now, the other thing that happened this weekend, and something that's happened in the past, I've caught some carp in the edge in the past, but I made the mistake of not throwing some bait in the edge, ground bait micros, to try and catch some carp late on. So again, with my ground bait limit now, I want a bit of ground bait for a feeder. I want to feed some ground bait initially on my long pole line. And I'm going to want some ground bait in the edge. So that doesn't leave you almost any bait to be able to fish with slop. So it's sort of making your decision. So personally, I just feel like unless the ground bait limit gets relaxed, that's the paste slop shallow fishing over there, to be honest. So I'd like to have done a little bit more on it because I still feel like there's quite a bit to learn about it. But if you haven't got enough bait, you're stuck really, to be honest. No point in doing it for an hour and then starting to do something else. I'd rather just say, this is where I'm fishing, primary shallow line, spend the time building it up, only to build it up and I've got no bait, so I've got to do something else. So that hopefully answers that question, Martin. But if you want me to do, if anyone wants me to ever do sort of like a mini session or something that it might help you on your local venue, just fire it over to me and I'll do my best to get it sorted for you. So hopefully that helps, Martin. So on to our next question. It's from Jamie Robbins. You're right, Jay. Hi, Paul. Just watched the giveaway video and was wondering, how do I enter the next one? Cheers. You don't have to enter it, Jamie. Literally, Joe does a random what is it, random number generator thing. So on our pages of our subscribers as such, random number generators as such. So everyone every month is in with a chance of winning. That's literally, you're a subscriber, you're in the chance. So don't worry about it. If you haven't won, message her, give her a load of grief. But no, she does it fair and square. That's why I don't want to do it, because there's obviously some people that subscribe to us that I know really, really well. And if their name happened to get pulled out, I don't want any involvement with it. So Joe does it, literally gives me the book. There's your winners, done. I don't have anything to do with it for that reason. So Joe does it every month. So yeah, give her some grief if you haven't been picked out. But no, that's it basically. It's just Guru and Blake's give us some prizes, and then Joe does it every month. So fingers crossed for next month, Jamie. So on to our next question. Right, I'll press them there. So let me just go down a little bit, scroll down. So the next question is from Paul. Hi, Paul. What mainline hammer do you tend to use when fishing shallow for F1s? Personally, Paul, I like 2 lines, to be honest. So when I'm fishing a little dibber, I like using 019 mainline. For the reason being is sometimes your rig might be literally that long in total. So when I'm catching, especially when you're fishing for F1 shallow, at times on some venues, you can literally just be motoring, just caning them, one every single chuck. So I like using on my dibber rigs 019 mainline. Because it's just so durable, to be honest. Whereas when I'm fishing my F1 shallows and my winter maggies, at this time of the year, I'll fish 017 mainline. And then all throughout the winter time, when I'm fishing for F1s, I just use 015 mainline. So all my winter maggies will be on 015 then when I'm catching them to sort of 2 to 3 foot. But just trying to make it durable, to be honest. Like, don't get me wrong, the lighter the mainline, the nicer it fishes, to be honest. 017 fishes a lot nicer than 019. But again, when I'm fishing dead shallow with short lines, one thing with 019 mainline rather than 017 mainline is it's stiffer, so it doesn't tangle as much. Again, when I'm fishing like on my dibber rigs and my really shallow rigs, some places tapping works really, really well. So by using that slightly stiffer mainline, it sort of bows out from the end of your pole tip, which is nice because when you're tapping, it's basically tight. Whereas if I'd done that with, say, a thinner mainline, it's more supple. So it's harder to keep tight, but that's what I use, and it's perfect for me, to be honest. So all my dibbers 019, and then all my F1 shallows 017. All my bottom rigs this time of the year, if I was going tunnel, would be 017 mainline, and then just throughout the winter I just use 015. Just keep it nice and simple. I never go any lighter than 015 wherever I'm fishing. Even if I was going to Porth and I'm fishing short for roach, I'd never fish anything lighter than 015. It just, when you're putting shot and stuff like that on the line, even me personally, I like put my shot on the line, crimp it on with my little pliers, and then what I do is I crimp the line, and then when it comes to sliding my shot, this is well worth talking about. I've got a bottle of this stuff, slip lubricant stuff, anything like that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a Preston one. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to move the laptop screen down. So what I do is I just squirt a bit like that on my table. And then when it comes to putting my shot on, I just put that and wipe it on the shot and then bump them up and put a bit of that on the actual line, like so, when I'm tying it. And then what you'll find is your shots will slide on your line so smooth and it'll never burn your line. Sometimes when you move a shot and it's like, oh, I don't know, that's a bit dodge. Use that, I promise you, when you've used that once and made a shot rig, you will never, ever, ever tie a rig without using that again. It's so good for that. So, again, yeah, nice and simple, to be honest. 015 winter time, 017, 019, and then for my carp rigs, again, for that reason, 022. No point in messing around, in my opinion. So, get us back up. Yeah, we're sorted, lined up. So, hopefully, Paul, that answers your question. So, on to our next question. This from Clive. Hi, Paul. What's the best way to attach rigs to pole elastic, please? Dacron or straight to the elastic? If straight to the elastic, what knot do you use? and doesn't it damage the elastic? So I'm going to get you a short kit out, because that's probably the only thing we will be able to see on here. So I get one out that's a bit loose, just so it doesn't matter. Ooh. I retie in my knot. Right, can I fit it in? So that there is my attachment, like so. So what you need is, in my little box of tricks down here, so these are the beads that I use. They're a size small. That's really important. And then basically, when you take your bead bit off, like so. Actually, I'm going to do this whilst I'm on, because that way we've got it there. Just for anyone that doesn't know. So here in a little box of tricks, a little pole elastic connection thing. So I've got my diamond eye threader, like so. Now when you get your bead, what you want to do, again, I'll move the table down more so you can see it. So what I do is I just cut that dacron like so. Yeah, so the top one, you see the dacron knot's missing. So now I can just slide that one straight off. Yeah. And then on me diamond eye threader, what you want to do is put your diamond eye threader right through the fat end. Yeah, like so. So that's on there. Yeah. And then obviously once you've threaded your elastic through, so once you've threaded your elastic through, then with your diamond eye threader, pop it. Do you know what? It's so awkward. It's like backwards doing it for me for this. So I'll pop me elastic on my diamond eye threader, like so, yeah? And then slide my bead. Again, just give it a wet. Slide my bead onto my elastic, like so, yeah? So that's how you want it, basically reversed, yeah? And then with this, you tie one overhand knot. So slide the bead down a bit, so I've got a bit of elastic, and then literally like that, yeah? So it's literally one overhand knot, yeah? Always wet, there, so you can see. Like so. So then that's my knot in it, yeah? And then I slide this over, and it has sort of click into place. So when I pull that and hold the bead, it's not popping out until, oh, there it is. So there, it's in my thing now. So there, it's not popping out. And then I can just pull that, and obviously it releases it. And then that is just a little bit too much elastic hanging out. So just trim it down, like so, and that's it. Now, every time I go to attach my line and make sure I tie it nice and tight behind that knot, every time I go to put my rig on it, I look at that elastic and just look at it and feel, you know, is it cut? Is it serrated? Is anything, ooh, if I pop you back up a little bit, you know, is it cut? Is it damaged? Is it serrated in any which way? And if it is, I just slide my bead down and literally overhand another knot, like so. So it's literally, I've lost a centimetre of my elastic. Now this one might be a little bit pinky because I've, you know, just cut it off as such. But what you'll find with it is it lasts a hell of a lot longer, you know, your one length of elastic. But no, it's never, ever, ever cut through me elastic, me line. I've never come back with, you know, some elastic in my pole where it's ripped me not off the elastic. It's never happened at all. Whereas with Dacron, I've only got little arms. It's happened when I've used Dacron, so I would never, ever, ever use it, you know, attach my elastic a different way than that. It's absolutely spot on. Again, you look at it and think, like, oh, I don't know. But honestly, I've never, ever, ever had a problem with it. And what's nice is you get to, every time you attach your line, you get to see there's no wear. So pop me other little bead back in. But yeah, basically that's how I do the elastic. And then when it comes to winter time, again, I'll do a video on that. We can do it in a live nearer the time when we're changing to using sort of long kits, really, really light elastics. What I do is I double bush my top kit, because then I've got a tiny, tiny little hole, and I do the same connection just with me solid elastics, and I use an extra small bead rather than a small bead. But if you wanted to, I think a small one is perfect. I use it up to, excuse me, black hydro, but for black and red you could use a medium or even a large if you wanted to. But I've only got little girl's fingers, to be honest, so I find a small one absolutely spot on. But that's how I do it, and I wouldn't ever do it any other way. You never have a problem with that, especially when you're fishing for F1s. I would categorically say that if I used my kit fishing for F1 shallow, or I had to use all my kit, exactly the same top kit, but set up as Dacron, I would not catch as much with Dacron as I would with that. That's how important I think it is. And also it prolongs the life of your elastic. You get a longer life of your elastic, because any little wear, all you're going to lose is, the difference between one overhand knot, so you can still use it. So that's the other thing. Whereas with Dacron, you can't, because by the time you've had to retie it. And the other problem I think with Dacron is the way them beads pull over so tight over your elastic. If you was to pull it and try and pull it off, you'd probably snap your elastic. Whereas with that, you see it every single time. So hopefully, Clive, that helps answer that question. So a bit further down. So here. Next question is from Simon Parker. Hi Paul, flexi stems, is there a place for them on days when the weather isn't perfect for, say, maggots and hard pellets spread out shot? And do you know the difference in weight between carbon and flexi wire? So this is a brilliant question, Simon. I genuinely think this is personal choice. So obviously using Rich's floats a lot in the past when they first come out. Rich always sends me some and asks me what do I think of them. All of his floats I absolutely love, but I have to say I don't like using flexi wire. The only flexi wire float I use is for dobbing bread. It's the only one where I feel like it just works bang on when you're suspending a bait. You still get quite a nice fall. It doesn't sit as dead quick as using a steel stem. And obviously a carbon stem, it drifts around a little bit. So when I'm dobbing bread, using a flexi wire stem, that's the only float that I personally like, using a flexi wire stem. When the conditions are good, I'm always want to use a carbon stem, unless I'm using a heavy float. So for 4B16, 4B18, deep, then I just use, like me, 4B18 Malman Rube as such, and that's just your standard steel stem. So you'll find, especially in my match reports and stuff like that, you'll find I use 1.7mm Maggie, which is a carbon stem float, from a 4B12, 4B14, but normally a 4B16 is common for me. And then when I want to use a float bigger than that, I use a 4B18 Malman Rube. Now that's a steel stem, so it doesn't really matter to me if it's sort of good conditions, bad conditions. When I want to use that float, it's either because bad conditions are quite deep, and when it's deep, I like using that float because it takes a lot of shot and it sits really, really nicely. Personally, again, I use carbon stems a hell of a lot, but in wintertime, or if I want to fish with pellets or my Gloucesters, then I'd rather use a steel stem. If I want to use a wire stem float, I want it to be wire. I want it to be heavy. Again, yes, you do bend an odd wire float. There's nothing you can do about that. When I go and fish sort of 2.5 foot on my dinks, I do get an odd wire that bends. That's just the nature of the beast with them. But personally, if it meant breaking an odd flow, I'm not that bothered about it. I remember I tried to use a flexi wire stem once when I was at Westwood fishing across, and it done my absolute Sweden, because it just felt like I was fishing with a sail. My float would not sit still, and it got to the point where I ship back during, and when I go Westwood, it's always a festival. I ship back, done the rig, got my float and scrunched, because I was that angry with it, threw it on the floor and got out a 1.5 mil dink, which is a standard steel stem float. Went over, plumbed it up, swearing to myself as such, giving myself a right telling of why am I using this bloody thing for. shortened all my line down, got my back shots, got all my rigs set up, had a to myself, right, start again, went out, shut my markers in, dropped my float in, and it sat there like there was a plummet on the float. And when I got back then, again, because I know Andy likes using them, I went through all my rig box bits with all my flexi wire floats and said, you can have them. I will never, ever, ever, ever use one ever again, because when it's windy, I want it to sit there. I want it to sit there like a rock. And yes, I know you're going to break an odd one. And when you think it's £2.20, when you roughly work out how much bait you throw away at the end of it, normally that's more than £2.20. So yes, the only downside personally to using a steel stem is you are going to bend and break an odd float. That's the nature of the beast. But when it's windy, it's that important, in my opinion, to use a wire float. I just could not that day bug the life out of me, to be honest, because I just thought, well, I might as well just be using like a little 3B8 winter maggots the way it's drifting about, because that probably would have sat better. Personally, I'm not a fan. The only float that I would say personally of using that I would only use the flexi wire is when I'm dobbing, because you get that nice, a lot of the time when you're flicking bread in, it's all about, it settles up, and just as it's settling, you get that little dink and you catch them like that. So if I use carbon when the rig's settled, because again, sometimes you can just catch them sort of suspending your bait and maybe an odd little lift and drop it back in. So you want weight in your float to be able to suspend your bait without it drifting, obviously, because your hook bait's like that. There's nothing, whereas when it's on the bottom as such, if I put that down there on the table, when your bait's on the bottom, even if there's a bit of wind, you've got friction from, it's on something, it's touching the bottom. Whereas when it's suspended, it's just hovering in mid water as such. So when you're dobbing bread, personally, that flexi wire is absolutely perfect in the fact you still get a reasonably nice settle of your flow. It's not just in and just, cocked straight away, which would be what would happen if you use a steel stemmed flow. You just get the best of both. And personally, that's the only situation where I would ever use a flexi wire flow. So hopefully, Si, that helps answer your question. But if you spoke to Andy, he'd say, oh, I like flexi wire, it's nice, I get on well with it. Me personally, when it's calm, I'm always going to use a carbon stem float. It's just so much nicer to fish with when you're shipping out. It don't bounce, it don't tangle. So when the conditions are good, I'm always going to use a carbon stem float. In that situation there, I might have used maybe a 4B12, 1.5 mil maggot or 1.7 mil maggot. But when it's windy, and again, it's too deep for a muddy as such, I used that because it was sort of what I thought would be the best of both, but it really wasn't. It was horrific. It felt worse than using carbon. So as soon as I changed my steel stem flow and just dropped my flow in, it just sat there so nice. So yeah, personally, I like steel and carbon, and I know when I'm going to use each one. For me, I've got no place apart from dobbing with a flexi wire, but it's personal preference. You might use them and think, do you know what, I just like using these, I'm more than happy. And I think a lot of things in fishing is personal preference, what you like, what you get on with, and what you're happy using. So hopefully, so that helps, answer your question a little bit. So if I scroll down a little bit more, so this is from Joe. Great answer. Great answer. Thanks a lot, Paul. Sticking to shallow fishing for carp, what length lash do you have on different rigs? So I think there's what I would call 3 type of rigs. So you've got a short line rig where you can obviously slap underneath your pole. And again, some venues allow tapping, some venues don't. But where you are allowed to tap, obviously having a short line, that's really important if you're ever looking to tap, because what happens is when you tap, we've done a video at Makings, a masterclass, so that could be well worth having a watch as well. When you tap, obviously you're creating waves from the water, which is when you tap, you're going to be pushing your float away from your pole tip. Now, when you tap in the water, you can't always see if the float goes under. So you want a short line. So when you tap, the float goes under and it just hooks itself against the pole. So if you're ever looking to tap, you could have quite a short line. So maybe 4 different line lengths, one with a dead short line to tapping. And then you can have one with, say, maybe an 18-inch, 12 to 18-inch 2-foot length of line. And that's what I would class as be a slapping rig underneath my pole. So you're going out, just keep slapping your rig. It's a nice line length to be able to slap and keep your pole tip a little bit further away, but it's a lot easier to be able to slap with, say, an 18-inch line, 2-foot line than it is with, say, a 3, 4, 5, 6-inch line. It's a lot easier to be able to slap, and you just get that nice rotation to be able to slap. It slaps nice every time if you can catch them underneath your pole tip. Then the next rig is what I would call a semi-fishing past your pole tip. So one with, say, a 3.5 foot line. So you can still slap it. Admittedly, it's a little bit harder because obviously you've got a bit more line. So the rotation of your pole is a bit more. But what it does allow you just to flick past your bait. So if the conditions, there's a little bit of breeze, a little bit, that sort of conditions, if it's not dead flat calm, then sort of a 3.5 foot line is nice because it's sort of a mini slapping rig. You can slap with it. It's not as nice to be able to slap with as a short line rig, but you can just pendulum your bait beyond your pole, especially when you're fishing with an 8mm. That's what works really, really well actually on Sunday's match on Syndicate Lake. 3.5 foot line, not too long, but it's nice just to be able to swing it past your bait, just past your pole tip. And then your last rig is what I'd call a really, really long line rig. So sort of a mugging rig where it's a full top kit length, barring, that much. When you hook your hook in the bottom of your pole, you've got that much elastic sticking out the end of your pole. But that type of rig is when you're mugging or you've got no wind at all, or wind off your back, but more no wind at all, because you need to be able to flick it out. Obviously, when you've got, a good maybe 6 foot of line between your float and your pole tip, if there's any wind, any drift, you float to land and it'd be moving. And that's a no-no. So that type of rig is purely a mugging or a flicking feeding rig, but obviously it's quite a lot harder to get yourself into that pendulum motion. So for that type of rig, me personally, I'm limited to 14 meters. Can't do that at 16. I'm just too little. I'm not strong enough. Whereas me 3.5 foot rig, I can do that at 16 meters because the pendulum is not as far. So what I would say is it's just working out the best rigs, but it's knowing, especially when you're long lining for carp, what rig you can use and what rig you can't use. But that's why I like setting it all up, because it could be quite windy at one point, so you need your little short line rig only for the conditions to completely change. No wind at all, wind off your back, the fish stop coming underneath your pole tip and they're just loitering around just past the back of your pole. So it's more the conditions as well. When it's loud and windy, you'll normally catch them under your pole tip because it gives them that bit of cover. The waves of the water, it breaks up all the, the skylining and such. You normally catch them underneath your pole tip. Whereas when it's flat and dry, normally that intermediate swinging rig, sort of, about 3.5 foot, 3.5 foot, 4 foot, that sort of length is about spot on, to be honest. But then if it's dead flat calm, then you can use your real long line rig. But when you're swinging your really long line rig, to be honest, 14 meters is doable for, I would say, most people. You can easily lift your pole up 14 and plop it out. One thing I will say is if you are doing that, try and use your dolly butt on your pole, because you're really going to be elbowing it at times. You're physically manhandling your kit, and it's going to take some abuse, especially when that float goes under, because obviously you've got an awful lot of line to be able to pick up. Just try and use your dolly butt when you're doing that. So yeah, a good little tip that is, because otherwise we've all done it in the past where it's gone and you can't help it. You've got you're like a coiled spring and you nail it and you just put your elbow through your section, and crack it as such. So yeah, when you're using that really, really long line rig, try and use a dolly butt on your pole. So hopefully, Joe, that helps answer that question. So on to our next question. Down here, Barry Robson, you're our buzzer. Can't find any info on the new Guru poles. What can you tell us, champ? Right, so the new Guru poles, there's two. So you've got the 700 one. I think that retails at £2,500. Again, it's recommended retail, so I don't know. Is that recommended? Yeah, I'm sure it's RRP. So again, I don't know if this is actual what the shops is going to sell them for. This is just from what I've heard. So the 700 one is £2,500. I've got a feeling, I want to say it's 14 meters, and you can buy the 16, but it might be 16. I'm not 100% sure because I know. Actually, don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure if it is 16 or not. Probably should be, I would think. And then the 900, which is the one that Andy's using, which is the flagship one, I think that is 4,500 RRP. When it comes to the top kits, though, I think they're doing something completely different where you can basically pick your own top kits. I'm sure that's how they're doing it. So if you don't use long match kits and you only use short kits, you just have all short kits with your pole. So normally when obviously you buy a pole, you get what you're given, then you have to buy extras. I'm sure with this, you get to pick all your top kits. I'm sure that's what the plan is. I'm sure that's what it is. When it comes to coming out, I think it's March. It was meant to be December, but basically with COVID, when the carbon comes from Japan, so all of what I would call flagship rods poles when it comes to Daiwa made, which a lot of people know I've used and I do use, and hand on heart, I personally love them. The carbon comes from Japan rather than China. When COVID happened, basically Japan just shut down. There was no work. So all of the carbon that was meant to be obviously has not been made. And then when it comes to coming over here, I think that's quite a lengthy process in the fact that I think it's refrigerated airplanes that it comes on. So for that, I think that's why there's a big shortage in terms of top of the range Daiwa pole sections, full stop. And again, if they can't get theirs for making their own poles, obviously there's going to be a limit in terms of making the Guru poles. So that's why it's been put back. I'm sure it was originally planned. I think it was before. I think I've got a feeling it was originally planned for around about this month, September time, and then it got put back to December. But I've got a feeling, from what I've heard, the new release date is March. And I'm pretty sure the price is, because Adam only messaged me the other day about it, someone asking, the Aventus 900 is £4,500. The 700 is £2,500. That's an unreal pole for the money. It's frighteningly good, to be honest. But the biggest thing I would say about the Guru poles, there's two things that I love about it and what I think personally would be a massive selling point. Personally, the top kits for me are bang on. They're perfect. So the short kits are a short third and a match number 2, exactly what mine are. I don't like the speed kit type versions. I think they're way too heavy for what they are, especially when you're fishing long. That you will notice a noticeable difference between using my kit and what I would call a speed kit, because I don't believe they make them anymore. So I feel like the short kits are bang on, and the long kits, I've got a feeling there's 1/3 section and 4 different choices of match number 2s. So, well, match number 2, so like a silverfish kit all the way up to your biggest, heaviest power kit. And I think the other thing, I'm pretty sure that you can have whatever kits you want with it. I'm sure that is what is going to happen as such. So you get to pick whatever kit. So I think that's a massive thing personally. You know, if you go to Tunnel all the time, you're not going to use a power kit. Likewise, if you went to Belingi all the time, you're not going to use a short kit. So I think that's the plan. So that's as much as basically I know. But yes, that's the planned release date, I think, is in March. I've got a feeling, Adam said to me, I might be able to get one from December time. So again, as soon as I get one, and obviously it's the released model, it's pointless doing it on a prototype that I might borrow. As soon as I actually get a pole, what I will do, if anyone wants me to, is when, obviously some people know me when I'm fishing and what have you, if you want to come and have a look at it, you're more than welcome to. One thing I will say with this pole is it's definitely stiffer. I'd say it's heavier, but personally, I think the biggest thing with it is its how long it lasts at what I would call peak performance. I feel a lot of the things with the very top flight poles now is, and again, some people might agree with me, some people might not. When I look back to poles that I've owned in the past, my tournament professional, I would say that was the last, what I would call brilliant pole when you bought it, and it was almost the same pole in a year's time. It hadn't really changed, it hadn't deteriorated. Whereas I feel like a lot of the problem with what I would say top, the the best flagship pole, whoever you buy it from, it's exactly the same. To make it that light, that stiff, and that responsive, you take everything out of it, you take all the resins out of it, there's less carbon. So it's pokier, but the problem is with the fishing that we do, they get ratted. You work out roughly on average what you catch on a weekend's fishing. They take some right hammering. And I don't feel personally the a pole, when you buy, whatever pole, flagship pole, an Air Z, a Browning top of the range, Browning the top of the range, Mave a top of the range, Preston. If you put it up to that pole 12 months down the line, it wouldn't be anywhere near the same. Whereas I feel like with this one, the first thing that I noticed when I very first picked it up was I grabbed the section, it was like, bloody hell. That's rock hard, that is. So I feel like with this pole, personally, it will last a lot longer at what I would call peak performance. So, but again, everyone's got their own opinion. There's rods that I like that other people don't like. There's rods that other people use that I would never use. Everything's personal preference. But when I do get one, if anyone wants to come and have a go using it, catch some fish. And I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to poles as well. Definitely well worth touching on this is, if you pick a pole up with no elastic in it and waggle it in a pole alley, there's no elastic in it, there's no wind, and you're not even sat on your own box properly, with your leg, you ain't going to have a clue of what it's actually going to be like in real life. So if anyone was ever thinking about buying a pole, make sure you use it. Make sure you go out, put it with some elastic in, because again, and this is the other thing, what I was touching on the short kit side of it. Again, I'm just going to quickly go off subject because I think this is well worth talking about. But when I was coaching a lot, there was a lad called Dale that I coached at Tunnel, and he had a go on my ratted, what I would call Triggers Broom, old air silver pole. And to be honest, it was like Triggers Broom. There's so many different sections. I've had it that amount of time, and my gear, anyone who's used my gear knows that it's not really looked after like it should be, because I'm using it all the time, and especially when I'm coaching. And he used my pole, and he was like, Paul, that's absolutely really, really nice. I want to get one. I was like, fair enough, but you don't need this pole for what you do. If you're coming here, you're only really fishing to sort of 14 meters limit, an odd time at 16. Personally, I would opt for the tournament professional, because I just think for the money, you ain't going to see a difference, between that and the air. You're not going to notice it. That pole will be more than, because again, it's like, if someone was telling me what to buy with my own money and I felt like you've led me up the garden path here, I wouldn't be happy. So if ever anyone asks me something, I always look at it as you're saying to me, Paul, I've just gone to the bank and taken out £2,500. Spend it for me. I'm going to make sure I give you the honest, best advice in terms of, would I buy it? If I had the money, is that what I would spend it on? Yes or no? So anyway, on to this thing. So we had another day, a little while later, and again at Tunnel, because you go in there improving and sort of, the next step onto it as such, once the fishing had changed a bit, and he got his tournament professional. And I still had my ratty old hair that had been, again, battered for a few more months. So I always like taking it in turns on people's gear, because I think it's important when someone sits on your setup and sees what they like about it. But again, what they might not like about it. You can learn just as much by seeing something you don't like to confirm what you do like. So I always like people jumping on my gear and seeing how I go about it. And he jumped on my gear and he's like, your pole's 1,000 times better than mine. I said, it's impossible. It is impossible. Your pole is new. Your pole cannot be better than my pole cannot be better than yours at 14 meters with a short kit and a short fall. You cannot. It's impossible. I'm telling you that now. And I said, I tell you what, we'll line them up next to each other on the grass. and you can see. You can pick them up, pick one up, shut your eyes, and I'll move the poles around, and you tell me what one's yours and what one's mine, because you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. I know that for 1,000,000%. So I've lined them up on the bank. Unbeknown to me, I've just grabbed my top kits and just put them on the pole. And he's picked his pole up and he's gone, "You changed your pole. You changed my pole." And I'm going, "I ain't changed your pole. I'm not trying to do you over, Dale. I'm not changed your pole one bit." And he's looked up and he's gone, "You put your top kit on it." And I'm thinking, it ain't going to make no difference. You've got a short kit. I've got a short kit. When I put it on the pole, you would not believe the difference it made. It was frightening, and that weren't even with a pot on the end of your pole. So, again, that's why one thing I will say, on that Guru pole, the speed kits, the short kits, I personally think they need to be a short third and a match number 2, because they are so much better. And it was noticeable that day at 14 meters. It just shocked me how much of a difference it actually made. The only difference with my kits compared to a speed kit, again, because we're talking about, top flight match fishing, being the very best you can be, picking, the 1% out of everything to try and make it as good as it can be. The problem is, if somebody bought my top kit and decided to put black hydro or purple hydro in it, it would absolutely probably obliterate. It's not made for that. So that's the other side, of the manufacturing side of it, which is what I've had to learn over a few years with Guru as well. There's certain things that I go to Adam and say, "Ads, I want this. Trust me, this is the best thing ever." And he's like, "Paul, trust me, if I made this, I'd have about 8 billion returns, because everyone would break them. Not everyone is fanatical and anal and looks after, especially, my rods and reels, they might get a bit dirty and my pole's covered in clay because it gets used a lot. But when it comes to like my little floats, everything that I've got, obviously with all me, floats in them boxes, you can see how, how well I look after everything with that side of it. So again, on that side of it, not everything can be mass produced to the level where, I had a couple of people message me about the Guru foam float, so I'm breaking a few, and I think, how do you break that? Like, I'd have to use an amateur. I couldn't break it. But obviously what happens is your flow, if you're fishing that deep and you get stuck in your landing there and the fish rolls on it, probably is going to snap. But it's that side of it, with the tackle manufacturing side of it, when they're on, mass producing it for everyone, from the pleasure angler all the way up to us. All of our, needs and desires, unfortunately, they can't be met all of the time. But hopefully, anyway, Baz, hopefully that helps out, answer you a few questions about the new Guru poles when they come out. So, on to our next question. Just have a minute full of my juice. Hi, Paul. In an open tomorrow at Blundell's, going to have a day slapping for carp. Any advice? Blundell's. Just trying to think. See, I was thinking of Bradshaw's in my head. For as soon as I read that question, I was thinking, I'm sure that's a place with a line level limit, but it's not. What I would say is, again, set up a few rigs. One thing that I learned from Gold this weekend was, I've been going there trying to fish hand on heart, fishing 6mm pellets, and they don't see 6mm pellets. All they get fed is 8mm. And I changed to 8mm with me intermediate swinging rig, sort of 3.5, 4 foot line between me float and my pole tip, just flicking it out, feeding 2 or 3 8mm. And you keep doing it and you think, I ain't never going to get a bite doing this. And then you flick it out and it's like, but they're massive there. I had 7 carp and a handful of skimmers for £88. I don't know how big they are at Blundell's, but what I would say is set up 3 or 4 different rigs. You've got to work out, one, what are the right pellets to feed, or if that's what you're feeding, you might be fishing with maggots. What I would say is, I don't know if you're allowed to tap there, but if you're allowed to tap, once you know the rough depth, like at Gold, around 18 inches, that's always been the depth on the Golden Syndicate to be able to catch them carp. that just seems the depth. If I were unsure, well, I don't know, I'd always just set my float at 18 inch. So if I wanted to have a go on a tapping rig, just set my float 18 inches deep with probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 inch line. That'd be my first rig. And then I'd have another rig set at 18 inch deep, because again, I know that's a good depth, and maybe 2 foot of line. And for those 2 rigs, my first rig would be sort of this RW carb shallow, the smallest one, because I don't need a lot of shot with my short line rig, or me 2 foot rig. Again, as long as I've got sort of 1 shot under the flow, 1 number 10 down the line, that's all I really need, to be honest, when I'm fishing for carp, because I like that slow fall. So I'd use my smallest one for those 2 rigs, and then for me intermediate, my 3-4 foot rig, swinging rig as such, maybe a longer slapping rig, then I'd go for that type of flow. And then if there's an odd mugger about, or it's not just about mugging. Sometimes you can just say, if you're fishing shallow at 16 meters, what you can do is you can come back, take your 16 off, put your dolly in your 14, and then have that really, really long line swinging rig. It's like a dibber that takes this one, to be honest, probably not always the best float to show because it's discontinued now, or a 0.4 Drennan carp clear. I've got one somewhere. What pot are they in? That there it is. I can spot it. I literally got everything here, if I don't break anything. So that type of float, because again, I know you can just pop into a shop and buy one of them. A little carp 4, that takes sort of 6 number 8 cubes, which is bang on underneath your float. And use that as not just a mugging rig, if you can see them having a flick to them, but it's also a rig where, again, you can fish shallow at 16 under your pole tip, slap your rig, odd bit of tapping if you're allowed. But if it goes flat and bright and they're being a bit funny, what you can do is just take 16 off, put your dolly on, and use that long line top kit rig, because basically you're fishing and feeding in exactly the same spot. So all the time the weather's good, you can just do that. And it's amazing how many more bites you get when you're using that long line swinging rig, when you can do it, when the conditions are right, because they just don't like the pole over their heads. And then all of a sudden, if the wind changes, a bit loud, you know what I mean, a bit of wind on the water, take your dolly off, put your 16 back on, put your slapping rig out, and you could have slapped for ages when the conditions were wrong, caught nothing doing it, changed to a long line flick rig, caught a few doing that. Then all of a sudden, that wind comes, a bit of ripple on the water, go back on your 16, go on your slapping rig, and you start catching them because they're willing to come underneath the pole tip. So that's what I'd say. 2 things: set a few rigs up, but work out the best bait to feed. At Gold, it took me too long. I'm really annoyed with myself. Why didn't I just... You think I'd know by now that... Again, when I used to go there, me and Pem cleaned up after a bit of while, because again, I touch on this in my match report, but I drew next to Andy Gelder on, where was we? We were on Trelawney. I was on 23 and he was on 25. And I'll never forget that day, because you always have a chat. I like Andy and I love James. Those 2 lads, they've always fished together. They're so nice, just really, really nice people. And Andy had like 2 pints of 8 mils on his side tray. He had a pint of meat and a pint of casters. So I've gone up and I said, Andy, where's the rest of your bait? And he's like, I don't need any other bait. That's all I'm going to do. Got a few casters, try and catch a few roach. I've got a pint of meat that I'm going to throw some bait short. And then I've got some 8 mils. And I said, well, you're allowed more bait. You're allowed another 4 pints. Why don't you take it? He's like, well, I ain't going to use it. I know I won't use it. And that day he flicked 2 or 3 8 mil pellets and fished up and down at 16 meters, caught 140 pounds. Best part of that he caught in, I'd say, the first half of the match. Absolutely obliterated it. And afterwards he was absolutely amazed. I'd never fished 8 mils on the pole before. Never done it. And I come back from White because me and Pam, we went to Gold, and between us, we won a lot there. Caught fish on the pole in areas where other people, just couldn't believe it. Well, I'll tell you that when I come back, I drew next to Will on the far bank of Syndicate. I think Will was on 128 and I was on 129. And I've got my pole out. And he's like, what are you doing? Fish for silvers? I was like, no, I'm going to fish 8 mils on the pole for carp. And he looked at me, it's like, well, whatever amount of drugs you're having, I'll have half because you've taken way too many. He looked at me as that sort of, all right then, pal, type look, like, you ain't getting a bite doing that. And Will won the match, fishing a bomb. But I was second, and all I'd done was just literally cup a few 8 mils, drop my rig on it, and I ended up coming second. And you've never seen anyone move so fast. It was like all out, and he was there. Let me have a look at your rig. What you done? Why you do this? Da, 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 da. And it all come from what, from what Andy Gelder basically told me and Pem. And then I had my big break, as in I never went there for a long time, went to Tunnel. And then this weekend, it all just sort of just like come back in my head. I was feeding 6 mils, never had a bite. And I'm like, well, you used to fish 8 mils, catch on 8 mils. You fished 8 mils on the pole. You and Pem done really well doing this. What are you doing? You don't know. And I changed and I caught 3 carp and lost 1. So in that same little dodgy area bit that we draw, that 112, 111, we was actually on 109 on Sunday. So this is what I mean. A lot of people, I would have said a few years ago, myself included, where I'd have drawn there, got the right ump, gone right pissy, throwing my toys out of the pram. Certain people always draw the same bloody pen. I'd have done all of that, same as everyone else. And I went there and come second. And if I knew what I knew now, as in feeding 8 mils on the pole, and done that instead of fishing the way that I did, I'll leave that for the match report. If I'd have done that, and again, looking at the other matches, I know I'd have caught more, 1,000,000%, 1,000,000% I'd have caught more. So that's how important picking the right bait is. You'd think 6 mils, 8 mils, near enough's good enough, isn't it? You're only fishing shallow. It makes a massive difference. So that's one thing I would say. Work out what they want to eat. Is it maggots? Is it 4 mils? Is it casters? Is it 6 mils? Is it 8 mils? Is it meat? Whatever bait they want to eat, if you can feed them what they want to eat, you're already a winner. You're already winning. So that rigs are important. If you're not feeding them the right bait, it's irrelevant. So that's one thing, and it's just popped, from Sunday's match, really raw in my mind. So important to feed the fish what they want to eat. More importantly, it's what they get fed all of the time. Gold is dominated on them big lakes by Bomb and Waggler. Every single person on them matches feeds 8 mil pellets. So that is like baby milk to them. Again, that's why when we go to, Tunnel, the new stock fish, that's why they like eating micro pellets and 4 mils, because that's what they associate, that's what they're bred on, that's what they're fed on. It's what they know, what they want to eat as such. And again, on that middle lake, just touching on this because we're on this subject, I caught my biggest weight on the middle lake, fishing the casters, but I was in the epicenter side, to be honest. This weekend just gone fishing hard pellet shallow, to people that I know really well there, Jeff Edwards and Craig Meadows. Craig has said, I'm going to go there, I'm going to fish casters. And I said, well, you can do, mate, but personally I wouldn't. I just feel like they want to eat 4 mils unless you draw right smack bang like where I was when I caught the record as such, sort of 85 to 95, that little bit there. That just seems to be the epicenter. I said, if you're there, I feel like you're going to catch on it, but you're better off feeding 4 mils. Jeff was next to me, fish 4 mils, caught, changed casters, just like feeding cyanide. They don't know what it is. They won't need it. It's not to say, next week they might start eating them, or in a year, 6 months' time they might start eating them. But when they're new fish, all they want to eat is pellets. Then eat maggots. Again, in the winter, though, you have to feed ground bait, even to catch on maggots. If you don't feed ground bait, it's like they don't know what it is. They don't come in the peg. So that's what I would say, Andrew. Think about the bait that you're feeding. I think that's so important. And after this weekend, both days, I think if there's one thing that's really stood out is make sure you feed them what they want to eat. So hopefully that helps answer your question. So on to our next question. It's from Luke Perkins. Hi, Paul, do you ever use 1.2 mil maggots or just 1.5s and 1.7s? I use 3. So I use a winter maggie, which I'm going to get them out of my box so I can show you. So I can show you the different. So that's a 1.5. Right. So Personally, when I'm fishing for F1s, for roach as well, when I'm fishing across, like in shallow water, that winter Maggie, so it's like a solid plastic bristle. All I do, excuse me, is I just give it a coat with this Sensor's paint. So a red one, and I tell you what's really, really nice when you're fishing across, and dig it out of the box, just so I can show you. Because again, when you're fishing across, like on Snake Lake, especially in the winter time, you would not believe how good a yellow float is. Frighteningly good. But it's just more when I'm fishing across winter time when it's low light and you've got all them broken twigs and leaves and that, and you can't quite see your float, can't see a black one because it's too dark, and a red one don't really stand out. Use that and it's like, whoa, God, that's proper bright. Make sure you have a few yellow ones when you're fishing across winter time. But personally, that flow I like for, my shallow fishing all year round, to be honest, like a 4B8 and a 4B10. When I'm fishing across on a Snake Lake, like 2.5 foot, 3.5 foot, it's just such a nice flow when you're tapping a few maggots in. It's frightening how many more bites you get on this compared to using a normal maggie. Again, talking about our shallow fishing, is how slow it sinks. Really, really nice. I did try using them down the middle. No, not the flow, to be honest. When you're fishing above, I don't know, for F1s, this is, I just found that it wasn't the flow. When you're fishing 3.5 foot and if fishing shallow, like even down to sort of 14 inches, 12 inches, I've caught them shallow on my little 4B8s. But I like that flow predominantly for me when I'm doing my silverfish fishing. It's nice when I go to woodlands. I wouldn't use it at Gold because it's too deep for that. I think these, even the bigger sizes, you're limited really to where it works nice, about 5 foot. I just don't think they take enough shot. I think a Maggie works better after that, a normal 1.5 Maggie. So personally, these, when I use them a lot, is when I go to woodlands Thirsk, and because again it's dead shallow, only 3.5 foot. When I fish across on the Snake Lake, and when I'm fishing what I would call deep shallow, anywhere between say 2 and 3.5 foot, they're absolutely bang on for that. So that's what I use them winter Maggies for. Then our next Maggie, which is a 1.5mm Maggie, this is all my floats from a 4B10 to like a 4B16 if I'm going to stop shaking, Paul. That float there with a 1.5mm bristle, that's what I use for all my deep water fishing. So again, when I go at Gold in the winter, 4B14, 6 foot, just sit and work. So nice. They're just absolutely perfect. So with me winter Maggies, all my winter floats, I tie them up on 0.15. All my 1.5 Maggies, I tie up on 0.15. The only difference is my few odd 4B8, 4B10 shallow rigs that I use in the summer, I tie a few up on 0.17. And then say that's me 0.15. They're all my deep rigs, all my deep track rigs, 0.15. They're bang on. And I use that in a 1.5. Then when I want to start using sort of 0.17 mainline, I just use a 1.7 Maggie. And that's it. Personally, I don't use a 1.2 Maggie because I want to use them down the middle. And a 1.5 Maggie dotted right down, I can see it. And I think it's really, really important to be able to see your little bit, I can dot it down, I can see it like it's basically like a little mini beacon. I don't struggle, whereas I know with a 1.2, I ain't really got a place for it. I don't feel like, if I used a 1.2mm bristle, I'd get more balance because I always dot my float dead low. Personally, that's why I just use them 3 floats. I've got, my winter Maggies for when I'm fishing across deep shallow, bang on, bit of silverfish fishing as such. That's fine for them. All my track fishing in the winter, or even at Gold, up to 6 foot. If it's difficult, I'm using 0.15 mainline. I want a 1.5mm bristle because I can still see it at distance. That's what's important to me. And then when it's good and I'm using, like if I want to use my 1.7 Maggies, I actually tie them to 2 main lines. I've got 0.17 for all like my summer F1 fishing, and I've also got them tied to 0.22 if I'm going carp fishing. I love them. They're absolutely bang on. So that, me personally, Luke, I don't have a place in my fishing for a 1.2. I just feel like if you stick with those three, your solid plastics, for what I just said, a 1.5 for all your track fishing and a 1.7 for all your summer fishing, you ain't going to go wrong. And what's nice, you just get used to certain type of floats that you like using. But what's important for me is I can see them. Like, would I use that little Winter Maggie if I couldn't see it? No. But when you coat them with that sense of pain, literally just wipe them up. There's the red one there. And then obviously they do a June one, I think it's called, which is my yellow. I don't use black for my black floats, or just Sharpie pen, but just get some yellow on there. But the difference that makes when you put it on a solid plastic bristle, I only think it works on a solid plastic bristle, is frightening. Absolutely frightening. It stands out so well. So that's what I will say. But hopefully, Luke, that helps answer your question. So, moving on. Right, we are cooking on gas. So on to our next question is, I think this is the right one, is it? This is from, oh, 1 minute, let me see if I can, oh, we haven't got a name. So this is from someone. Hi Paul, fished a match on Saturday and started on the pellet waggler, pulled out 5 fish on the bounce. Could it be their males? Use the 16 Super MWG. Thanks, Derma. Yes, but wait there, because I want to show you something. So I've got a library, it's my waggler connection box. So definitely worth talking about this. So it could be a few things, Dermot. So firstly, when you look at Coppins pellets, right, a lot of them are a teardrop shape. So make sure that your hook point comes off at the thinnest end, and also check the size of your pellet. I've been doing quite a bit of that lately. When I come to pick out my hook pellet, it's really important, I think, to go for a little one, like a small one. Don't pick out a great big oblong, because some of them are dead long. They're horrible. So think carefully about the size of the pellet you're putting on. When you put it on your band, I haven't got any upstairs, they're downstairs, and it takes me too long to find them. Basically, they're like a teardrop shape. So make sure the thinnest point of the pellet, that's where your hook is. So I think you'll be able to hook them better. But also when it comes to how you tie the hook, so what I want is, I can show you. So if I can hook it on my finger, let me see if I can. For me, it's being able to hold it still enough for you to be able to see it. So it's a problem when you shake like mad. So let me see if I can hold it still enough. That's where I want my band as such. If that makes sense. So just off the bottom of the hook. I think if your hair length, see again, because when that is stretched, it's really. I've got something. There we are. Come on. We can figure this out, can't we? Hey, how good's that, mind? Is that the one? Yeah, that's the one, isn't it? See, when the band's stretched around the pellet, obviously the band's going to be stretched. So that's how it's going to sit. It's going to sit just below the bottom of the hook. What I think is important is you don't want it too far away from your hook. I know some people, I look at their hair length and think, that ain't the one for me. Because I think a lot of the time when you waggler fishing, obviously falling, it's a reactional thing, and it's getting it all in their mouth. A lot of the time when you fish with these big carp, they've seen it all before. They're bloody cute. So I think the reason, hand on heart, from what you're saying, you pulled out 5 fish. I personally, if it was one thing, it's the pellet. I think the pellet's too big, and the way that it's on the band is on the fattest bit. That's genuinely what I think, looking at that. The other thing it could be is your band's too far away from your hook, or it's too close. It's behind the hook, if that makes sense. Like right up where my whipping is as such. It's too far up the hook, if that makes sense. So could definitely be the way your hook's tied. I honestly think, from what you're saying there, it is the pellet. That's genuinely what I think it's going to be. Now, the other hook to have a play around with, and again, it's something that William showed me, is using a QM1. You'd never think that that could be a really, really good hook for a waggler, but he used them a hell of a lot, and I have used them. The only thing I will say, when I have used the QM1, and Andy's had the same as well, because we're all talking, is you fish with a QM1 and you're not really getting any bites, and you change that hook and all of a sudden you start getting bites. So the size of the hook, weight of hook, it all makes the difference. So have a go with the QM1 if it's solid, and especially if they're pulling the rod. QM1 could be really, really good hook in a 12 or a 10, probably a 12 to be honest. But I think the reason why you've lost them is your pellet's too big. I don't know what that noise was. Probably some drunks outside. And it's the way that you're putting it on the band. That's what I think it is. So, on to our next question from Joe. Yep. Being a good boy, mate. Being a good boy. So, next question. This from Who Makes Blue Dibbers. So, these floats are an old Drennan float. They're called a Drennan Carp 4 in a 0.5. And you can see that they look horrific. And basically what it is a whip the eye on the float, because otherwise they just fall out. Basically, they're just a really, really old Drennan Carp dibber, but they're a 0.5 gram size. Let's see if you can see better on that one. Yeah, you can see better there. So they're just a really, really old Drennan float, Drennan Carp 5. And what I like about them is they take a load of shots. They take sort of 6, 7, number 8 cubes for the actual swinging rig. They're just really, really nice. Again, it's something that when I'd done that a long, long time ago, that's what I used. So it's a weird, like, when you speak to, if ever you ever see Joe, like my missus, all she ever says to me is, "Paul, don't like change." And I don't. I'm a creature of habit. I like once I've used something and I've done well using it, I'm sort of sold on it, and I feel like, well, if it ain't broken, I don't need to try and fix it. So what I tend to find is where I'm sort of here, there, and everywhere. I do a bit of this, and I do a bit of that, and then I'm doing this, and I'm doing that. I need to come back to what I used in the past, because I know that I've used that before mugging or swinging rig, and I've won matches doing it. I've caught a load of fish doing it. So I'm not good with change. There's got to be a few people that say to me, like, I tell you, a perfect example was those Kaizens. So who was it who said to me first? I think it was, because I used to use this hook called it was a Corum S3 hook. And the reason I used them is they were so sharp, it was a joke. Like, they were ridiculously sharp, frighteningly sharp. And that was the only hook I used. I was so confident in them. It was frightening, to be honest. And then basically they got discontinued. So I'll tell you what, I've got them here somewhere in a packet. I just don't know in what. I'm bit mad for a pot, me. I love a plastic pot. That's another bad thing. You can see I've just got plastic everywhere. Not good for the environment, me. But I've still got them. And Guru brought out this hook called a Kaizen. Now, fortunately for Guru, if there's something that I want, I don't have to pay for it. But me being me, I like using these Corum S3 hooks. So I was still trying to find a few and buy them. And Adam said to me, "Have you not tried them Kaizens for maggots yet? You love them. Like, that's the sharpest hook you will ever use." And I'm thinking, nah, I've heard it all before. I'll use what I use. And then I think it was Andy that said to me at Whiteacres, "Oh, you tried them Kaizens yet, Paul? They're frighteningly sharp." Yeah, whatever, mate. Yeah, whatever. I hadn't. And again, I didn't listen, because I was sold on what I was more than confident in what I used. It's not broken, apart from the fact that I can't get them anymore. And then it was Pem that said to me, "Paul, you need to try them Kaizens. They're frightening." Now, me and Pem go way back, like a long, long way back. When I first started going to gold, we shared a lot. It's a shame you don't see him he likes doing what he likes doing. So you'll see him at the moment. He's just on Tamar and Bow Beach, and then you'll see him like he might have a few matches at Willingshurst. But Pem gets bored quickly, so and then they'll have a few matches at Goals, and then they do something else. But he is frighteningly, ridiculously good, like silly good. He just don't take it like I'm obsessed with it. Pem loves his fishing, but there's more important things in his life than fishing. But he is so good, frighteningly good. When he says something to me, Paul, you need to try this. I trust him with my life. It almost, well, I do basically. I love him to death. You know, we've grown up together almost. So there's a handful of people when they say something to me. Other people might say, and it's not that I don't respect Adam Rooney. It's not that I don't respect Andy Bennett. You know, and he's arguably probably the best commercial angler in the country. But I suppose now, you know, when he says something, I do. If it was F1 fishing and what he does, yeah, definitely. But when it comes to the carp side of it, you know, I feel like I'm more experienced than him at that. So I'm not. Whereas when Pem said to me, "You need to try it, mate. I think you really like them," and I said, "Would you use them for maggots?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, I've never used anything else." And then I used them, and I was like, "How have I not used? Why didn't I listen?" But that's the way I am. I'm always going to be like that. That's sometimes it's a good thing because I don't like change, so I don't get lost. I don't confuse myself. But sometimes it takes me too long to change. But hopefully that answers your question, Joe. So on to our next question. This is from Gary Hearn. How did you get on with the Preston Duraslip? I recall you were comparing it to the Hydro. Just wondering if you now use it over Hydro. You boys are going to love this. So again, where is it? I've got some stuff down here. Look at this stuff. Right. So at Gold yesterday, because I know, and I do apologise, I've apologised in the past. 1 second. 1 second. So this stuff here is the hybrid, Daiwa hybrid. I see William in the shop yesterday. They've got the lighter sizes, but this come in and it's just gone. And every time I go in there, they've never got any. So I did say I was going to do a comparison to the hybrid stuff, and I will try it. Now, up until where I was, hand on heart, again, this perfectly, you couldn't have wrote this question at any better time. So exactly what I was just saying before. I don't like change. I like what I like. It's, for me, yeah, basically in a nutshell, when I use Hydro, I know exactly what it does. Now, when I tried the hybrid stuff, obviously at that point I'm going to tunnel and all I'm doing in is F1 fishing. So for me, when Hydro doesn't work is wintertime because it's a hollow elastic. Obviously it's got some fluid in the middle of it. When it's really, really cold, it just reacts badly to the cold. It just don't like the cold basically. So it droops, it just don't work right. So I was thinking that is the perfect thing for me. Hybrid elastic, stretches more than solid. It's going to be bang on. You know, I'm really looking forward to using it. When I used it, it was horrific. I hated it because, one, it didn't seem to come out of my pole nowhere near as nice as what my Hydro does compared to what I was using at that time, which is pink Hydro. Didn't come out. It's like it was stuck in my pole. That's what it felt like. Like my bead was stuck. Like it didn't want to come out of my pole. And then it just weren't nice coming out of the end of my pole. Now, one thing, I didn't use it with lubricant. I don't like using lubricant because I think you become a slave to them and you can't get it out of the inside of your pole. It just don't come out. So that's one thing I know that from obviously what I've learned, people that use hybrid elastics all the time, they don't use it without a lubricant because it just don't work right. But the bit that bothered me more than anything else was I hooked a few bonus fish when I was on Club Carp and I lost them. And now I know if I'd used pink Hydro, pink would have carried on stretching. I'd have got them fish out. It was not like they were, in the middle of summer and they're tearing me off with, but it was winter time and it just didn't work right for me. I just did not like it. I genuinely felt it was the worst stuff that I've ever used in my whole life. I'd rather either, again, a bit like talking about a wire stem flow or a carbon stem flow. So me carbon stem flow would be same as solid 6 Preston, with solid 5 Preston. That's me solid elastics, and me wire stem flow, that's my hydro, that's my hollow elastics. This hybrid stuff was almost like how I felt with it, to be honest, was a bit like this flexi wire stuff. Some people love it, other people don't. The only reason, hand on heart, that I'm entertaining, or the only reason I'm actually doing these videos, is because of the price. I totally get that hydro being 15 quid, you know, compared to Preston one or the Dart one where it's £6, £6.50. I totally get the price point element, but using it in a short kit for what I was using it for, it just didn't work right for me. Now, I've never used it in a long kit, so it might work really, really nicely in a long kit, and that's why Will is giving me some of that. So when I get back from Whiteacres, then I've got my time to be able to do them in a long kit and also do them in a short kit. So I'm going to go to gold, and I'm going to do like a black hydro, grey hydro, white hydro equivalent in a long kit, and then I'm going to go on the middle leg and do some short kit equivalent. So I get my Preston stuff because I've just taken it out of my pole, I've left it down here. And again, it might work nicer in the heavier grades. I spoke to Andy and he said for a long kit, the 15 Duraslip, he said that's really, really nice. It works really, really nice. But again, I think it's all personal preference. But the fact that I've only used the one type of elastic, which was the Preston one, my initial thing of using it is like the 9 hollow, was it 9 Duraslip? No. Yes, so the 7 I used, which I would have thought would be the equivalent to yellow hydro, was like something of nothing. It just didn't do anything. I really didn't enjoy using it whatsoever. It felt like it had no guts behind it. It just didn't do anything. It was like spaghetti. I don't know. I just didn't like it. It was like it come out and it just never stopped coming out. But it never felt like it powered up. And the biggest thing with elastic is what I want is once I've used my puller, is when I lift up, if I've got it right, if I've got the right grade, when I'm using it, they're still stretching me elastic and I don't have to overuse my puller kit. So if I use my Y and I need to pull it, I might have to pull it once and a half or once and I'm netting the fish. If I'm going, I need to use grey, I'm using the wrong elastic. So what I found when I used it was my 7 was something of nothing. It didn't do anything. I mean, 9 was too harsh. It was horrible. It didn't come out with pole right. My 7 left my pole lovely. That was about all there was to it, because the rest of it, when it comes to netting the fish, I'm basically hand lining it. I'm having to lock my elastic out. It's locked out because otherwise it just, there's no guts to it. So it doesn't stretch. I'm physically pulling all my elastic out of my pole to be able to net the fish. And that's not what I want to do when I'm using that type of elastic. I want to pull my elastic, whereas when I use my yellow hydro, for argument's sake, I pull my elastic. Yes, I've got to pull a bit, especially if I've got a great big car. But when I'm playing it and it does that, I can feel it's not pulling on me, the end of my pole. It's pulling the elastic is still stretching. And I found with that, I mean, the 7, which come out of my pole nicely, didn't do any of that. And my 9 didn't come out of the pole nicely. And it just locked up way too quick. And I thought, do you know what? I'd rather just use my 6 Preston than this stuff. I don't like it whatsoever. But I will do it in a long kit, and I will do it because that was winter time as well. So maybe in the warmer months, you know, when I'm going now and it's fishing really, really well, and it still will be when I get back from Whiteacres, I can go on that middle lake because they'll be pulling a bit. And instead of using the, you know, those types of elastics, I use like the 11 and the 13 and see how, you know, I might use them and feel like, bloody hell, Mr. Trick here, you know, typical Paul, like I'm 2 years behind everyone else because I don't like change. But I can try them and let you know how I get on with it. And also I'm going to go on the big lakes and do it with, say, 13 and 15 through a long kit, and do it with the equivalent of the hybrid, Darwin hybrid stuff. I will do it. It's just, it's been so manic, to be honest. And the fact that I haven't been able to actually get the heavier grades of it, I will do it. But if you ask me now, would I ever use it over hydro? The answer would be categorically never, personally. I like what I like. Whereas if William was sat next to me here and Des was sat next to me here, and again, doesn't matter to them too, you know, they're sponsored anglers, you know, they've got no gain or whatever. If you ask them to, would they ever use a hollow elastic again? The answer would probably be never. So it's very, very personal. It's a personal choice. And again, leading on to our previous question, I don't like change. So what I like with me as well is I know if I use a certain elastic to a certain main line to a certain hook length and a hooker unit, I'm not going to get snapped up. And that's what I found was when I was using it. The only thing that I would genuinely say what I like about the hybrid when I used it was light in my pole tip. That was the only genuinely thing that I could say that it was noticeable, you know, especially when you're fishing at longer lengths. So, but it's something that I will do, Gary. I will get on it as soon as I get back from my acres. I promise. So, on to our really, really itchy nose. Right, no, not pull. Got to press the down button. So, this is from Joe. What floats do you use for F1s on Snake Lakes in the winter for different situations, Paul? So I did answer that one. I'll quickly run through it again with you, Joe, though. I would use me winter maggies when I'm fishing across. Normally, I would say a 4B8, 4B10. They're the two sizes. So when you're fishing across sort of 3.5 for tapping a few maggots in, that little winter maggots is really, really nice for that. And also what it's nice for is some days, even in the winter time, you can catch them deep shallow. So between 2 and maybe 3.5 foot. Some days they just pop off bottom, you know, last 40 minutes. The competition, they've come into the peg and they're starting to eat well and they just come up. And that winter Maggie rig is absolutely, that's the best rig for that 4B8 normally, to be honest, 4B10. That's what float I'd use for that. And then me other floats that I use 2 other floats. So I use a 1.5 mil Maggies and I use a 4B10. I would say up to sort of 4 foot in no wind. If it's 4 foot, you know, and it's windy, I'd use a 4B12. Again, if like 5 foot, I'd use a 4B12 in good conditions, 4B14. And then for deeper than that, I just use the 4B14s. And I only use that 1.5 mil Maggie for that. And then for all your dobbing, you know, dobbing bread, when you're dobbing bread up to about, I would say, 3 foot is probably the limit. I'd use a 3 number 10 RW dobber. And then for deeper, so if you're dobbing them deeper than that, you know, 3.5 foot and deeper, then I'd use the 5x10 dobber. And they're the only floats. The only other float I would use is when you're fishing with pellets. And then I'd use a 1.5 mil dink. Actually, I'll get you these floats out because I've got them all with me. Because the other two I haven't spoken about. So, I've got the which ones. Got all my bits and pieces up here because obviously sorting all my rubbish out for white acres. So see, they're the carbon stem maggot floats. When it comes to your bread dobbing, so you can see one's a 3 number 10 and one's a 5 number 10. They're the floats that I'd use for dobbing bread, dobbing maggots. And then my last 2 floats are my pellet floats. So in the green winder, it's a 4B12 dink, 1.5 mil dink. Again, that's steel stem. That's what I like using. So my 4B12, I'd use that fishing sort of down to about, I would say, just over 3 foot. 3.5, no, just over 3 foot. If it was 3.5 foot, to be honest, I'd use my 4B14, and then my 4B14 is the one that I'd use for fishing pellets down the middle, like micros and expanders. And that, to be honest, is my winter F1 rigs. Hopefully that helps answer your question, Joe. So, on to our next question. This from Ryan. What do you see the future will be in fishing, say 10 years time? Tackle, matches, venues, etc., or what do you want to happen? What do you see the future will be in 10 years? What do you see the future will be in fishing? So one thing that people always say, oh, there's no young'uns coming into fishing. And they've said that since I was a young'un coming into fishing. There's no young'uns coming into fishing, and it hasn't changed an awful lot, to be honest. I think what is good, I would say now, is I think fishing's in safe hands. I really do, especially. I know that I'm sponsored by them, but if I wasn't sponsored by them, I'd still be saying the same thing. I think Guru do so much trying to put youngsters into fishing, and I can't see that ever changing. If anything, I feel like with social media, more young'uns can get into fishing. Whereas for me, you know, my mum fished, my dad fished, my granddad fished. If they played cricket or snooker, would I ever gone fishing? I doubt it. I live on a river, but I don't think I ever would have gone fishing because I don't know how old you are, Ryan, but when I went to school, we didn't have mobile phones. We didn't have the internet, you know. It's mad to even say that, but we didn't have those side of things. So unless you knew someone that went fishing, you'd never see it. But obviously when I'm out a lot more, not just match fishing now. So when I was decorating, obviously I only went fishing when I was fishing a match, whereas now I go and do my filming a lot. So I'm at the venue a lot more now. When I'm not fishing matches, I'm there more when I'm not fishing matches than when I am fishing matches. And I see loads of youngsters about, especially on the commercial venues, Tunnel and obviously Gold that I go a lot. So I feel like fishing's in safe hands. I really, really do. I feel like, you know, it's going from strength to strength. If anything, you know, the COVID situation, I feel like that really helped fishing, you know, people getting back out into the open. And I feel like, without going, I don't know, too deep, I feel like the world we live in nowadays it's all so full on all the time. You know, everyone's chasing their own backside all the time, just so busy, 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 busy. You don't get any you time anymore. I feel like if you went back in time, say 50 years ago, life was a lot simpler. You know, you went to work and you enjoyed yourself. Whereas nowadays, this is sort of, I don't know the right word, but I feel like everyone's just so busy, like just bounding around all of the time, like a million mile an hour. So I feel like the whole COVID, what good did happen from it, which, you know, people remember when they were younger, like, oh yeah, I used to love going fishing, you know, I'm gonna go back and have a go doing it. And there was a lot more people doing it. So I feel like that will help people as well. When it comes to tackle, I just feel like there's always a bit like us with our fishing. The biggest thing that I always try and get across is what we do is 1,000,001%, but there's always more 1%. It doesn't matter how many. I could go now every single hour of every single minute of every single hour of every single day of every single month for every single year for the next 25 years straight, and I still wouldn't know it all. I'd still be like, I could have done that better. You know, we could have improved on this. And I feel like there's always the 1%. If you look, there's always room for improvement. No matter what you do, there's always ways to get better and improve. And I feel like that is what will happen with tackle personally. I just feel like, you know, technology involves, again, just touching on what I spoke about a minute ago, you know, when I was a kid, I'm 38 now. I don't know what age I was when I first got my first mobile phone. I think I might have been about 17, 18, probably 20 years ago. But up until that age, I've never had a mobile phone. Like, there might be some youngsters watching this, like, what is he even on about? There's older people like, bloody hell, well, I've only had a mobile phone for the last, you know, I didn't have it for the, you know, the first 40 years of my life, you know. There'll always be, technology was always going to grow. So I feel like in terms of angling, the world we live in nowadays, especially the affordability side of it, again, touching on this change thing, I've got an old rod upstairs that it is basically my pride and joy. It's an old Daiwa Connoisseur X splice tip special stick float rod, 13-foot rod. When I got that rod, it was literally, I don't know how to explain how much it meant to me, but it felt so light. It was like, it's like made out of air compared to the rods that I was using. And it was my pride and joy. Now, in my mind, I've done some fishing down there with Joe. Obviously, she likes going down the garden. I don't often get a chance to do it. Unfortunately, the fish is just nowhere near as good as what it was. But when I put that rod up, it weighs about 400 weight. It's so heavy, it's a joke. But in my mind, if you said to me about, because again, my memories of how good it was at that time, when I put it up to say one of my Aventus rods now, it's like, what's it made out of? Breeze blocks or something, you know? It doesn't feel like it's made out of carbon. It feels like, it genuinely feels like it's made out of lead. So I always feel like, you know, tackle, we're in a brilliant place. You know, I remember one of the best reels I ever had at that point was, it was a 2.5 IA Team Dar one. It was a 125 pound little silver reel, and how good that reel was. You know, and now that was a lot of money then. Whereas now you look at a Darwin Ninja reel and it costs, I don't know, 50, 60 quid. Like back then, that would have been worth about 12 grand. The tackle you can get nowadays for the money is frightening. Yes, don't get me wrong, a lot of it, you know, we carry more stuff, we take more rods, so it is still expensive. But the tackle you can get for the money, even in just my, you know, my short lifetime, how much it's changed. So I feel like technology wise, I just feel like there's never been a better time to go fishing as such. In terms of matches, again, I don't know, to be honest. I think the one thing that I would say is, or what I've learned when it comes to things like that, is there's so much choice. That's the biggest thing. There's so much choice in what you can do nowadays, where again, going back to when I first started going commercial fishing, it was more, you know, just your top flight team fishing. That was all there really was, and a few commercial venues. Nowadays, there's so much choice. You can literally do whatever. How well all of the qualifying matches stand up in test of time, obviously, you know, they're all very expensive. There's more festivals, but again, you know, that's improving. We're just getting more choice. I think one thing that I would say from you, or what I would say to anyone watching, the most important thing I've learned is being happy. Full stop. You know, if you're going somewhere and you're buzzing your tits for it, you know, you can't wait. You're like, right, I want to sort out, you know, your missus like, right, what are we having for dinner? You're like, I don't really give a monkeys. I'm sorting my stuff out for Saturday. I reckon this will work, min, and I reckon that'll work, min. And I can't wait to do this and I want to do that. If that's how you're feeling about it, you're doing the right thing. The second, it's like, well, you know, you're looking forward to Sunday. Yeah, it's what it is. I'm going there. Do you know what I mean? It's time for a change. I think one thing that I've learned, that if I could stress more importantly to anyone else about enjoying the fishing side of it, is, you know what you love. And I think that's one thing that I would really, when you're buzzing for it, you're doing the right thing. And that's one thing that I feel in terms of the matches, is not always doing what is led to be. You know, there's some people that would have you believe that because they like doing it, that's what you should be doing. If you're doing something else, why are you doing that for? That don't make no sense. Like, why are you going there when you can go here? I like it, you know, don't, because there's so much choice nowadays. You know, some people like this, some people like that. I think it's important for you to say, do you know what, I like doing this, and this is what I want to do. So that's what I would say. In terms of venues, I think certain ones get bigger, other ones fall off. That's just the way of the world, isn't it? You know, things change and you either change with it or you get left behind. But to be honest, if in a nutshell, I think we're in safe hands. I think tackle's never been better. There's more and more young'uns getting into it. There's more and more tackle companies. You know, disposable income's getting higher. I think that's a given, really, when you look at what your nan and granddad, you know, had, what you look at what your mum and dad had and what you had, and compared to what your kids have got, you know, disposable income's definitely been higher. So I feel like everything's going in the right direction. Yeah, I feel like we're in safe hands. The only one thing that I will say is just got to be careful on social media. Like, that's one thing I will say, you know. That's the only negative. If I could, I don't like talking about negatives, but sometimes I feel like you've got to talk about the bad things. Or the not as good things. We've got a million one good things. The one thing that you've got to learn with And what will continually get worse, I believe, is social media. And you've just got to, no one will ever come and have a pop to your face. They'll all have a word on Facebook. That's what I call it a lot of the time. Everyone seems to have an opinion on everything. And one thing I will say, especially if there's any young uns, or even anyone, some people might feel like they get affected by it, whatever. You just got to realise that some people are just scum, vermin, and that's how you got to treat them. And if that's their opinion, you don't want them in your life. So if there's one thing to say about the future, is you've got to take certain things with a pinch of salt and just not let it bother you. And I'd be lying if I said to you that's something that I haven't had to learn. So that's one thing that I will say. It's not like someone's coming up to you and saying they don't like you to your face. They'd never do that. No one ever seems to be brave enough to be able to say, do you know what, Paul, the way you've done that, I don't really like that. And I'd like to have a conversation if I feel like I've ever treated somebody wrong. I don't feel like I have. But everyone's got an opinion. That's just the way it is. So that's the only thing I will say. If there's one, what I would call negative about fishing, it's the social media side of it. But you just got to remember that it ain't real. And anyone who's putting on anything that you don't sit right with you, you don't want them type of people in your life anyway. So I'm going to leave that there because I'm not wasting any more time on it. But it's important to talk about it because if anyone out there, is getting bothered by it, don't. That's what you've got to remember. You've got to get that bit in your head. Everyone wants to see you do well, just not better than you. And William said to me as well, and there's something that I'll never forget, and it's one thing that in my fishing, that without fishing, I'm so fortunate to have been around the people that I've been around, because it's not just what they've taught me about fishing, it's what they've taught me about life, and being around older people definitely helps. And William said something to me that this is in a nutshell. He said, look, if you don't want people slagging you off, he said, don't ever be successful at anything, i.e. have, a high income in terms of what your job is. If you want to be successful at work, don't. He said, and if you want to be successful at fishing or any other sport, don't. He said, people only ever have a go at you, mate, when you're doing well. If you're not achieving anything, people will never have a go at you. So if someone is, digging at you, like, oh, bloody hell, you draw bag, whatever, just got to remember that's what it is. You're obviously doing something. So just treat it like that. But I wanted to touch on that quickly because I've been in that position in the past, and I know other people will be in the future. And if it gets out of your brain, do you know what I mean, a lot quicker than it got out of my brain, then it was well worth the couple of minutes spent talking about it. So hopefully, Ryan, that helps. So on to our next question. Bands or straight hooking maggots for shallow fishing? And when you decide to use pellets, casters, or maggots? So personally, when it comes to fishing maggot shallow, I always like straight hooking my maggot for a few reasons. One, I think the movement of the maggot's really, really important. And a lot of the time, I think double maggot is better than a single maggot. But if there was one time when I'd look to band a maggot rather than straight hooking it, would be if there's a lot of little blips in the peg. Because banding a maggot, having it separate from your hook as such, they can't seem to get it all in their mouth. So you miss a bite, but you don't hook the blip. Whereas when you straight hook your maggots, the float goes under, you strike, you set the hook, you obviously hook the blip. So if you're getting a lot of little tinies in your peg, then banding a maggot could be good. But personally, I just like straight hooking them because I can hook one maggot, I can hook two maggots, I can hook three maggots. It's just personal preference, but I personally like straight hooking my maggots. And then when it says, when do you decide to use pellets, casts, or maggots? So because I'm going to Gold, because I would say it's a newly stocked venue, they just want to eat 4 mil pellets. That's what they associate with. I'm sure this is more about F1s and carp, but they just associate pellets what they want to eat. Whereas when you go to, say, a more mature, F1 fishery, say tunnel barn, partridge, they're old now. And what will happen is when they're young, when they're new fish, pellets are the bait, micros, 4 mils, that's the bait. It's like baby milk to them. And then what will happen is throughout the winter time, people will start feeding live maggots. They get a taste of some live maggots. And live maggots can work really, really well with them, especially in the winter time when they want to eat them. And then when they're older and they get bigger, casters can work really well. Now, the best way I can try and explain this is when with new fish, pellets, that's when I'd look to use pellets. Old, mature fish, I'd always use maggots or casters. Now, the thing with any bait, barring maggots, is you throw some on the floor, casters, maggots, worm, corn, meat, pellets, hemp. What else is there? Anything basically you can throw on the floor behind you, and until something eats it ain't going nowhere. Chopped worms is going nowhere, even dead rabinas, eventually they're drowned, but they ain't really, maybe live dead, but no one feeds live dead, whole dead rabinas as such. But chopped worm, everything stays there dormant until it's eaten. The difference with live maggots is basically they wriggle out the peg, they wriggle in the seal, so your peg is forever sort of cleaning itself almost. You don't end up with that big build up of bait. Now, when the fish are feeding really, really well, like height of summer, catching your big waves, casters are brilliant because they make a load of noise. The fish eat them dead aggressively, but the biggest thing is you end up with this build up of bait on the bottom. So all of the time you're priming it and they're not shallow, they're on the, you're building them up slowly onto the bottom. And then more and more fish come in because they're eating, they're going mad, and then they start competing. But whatever doesn't get eaten is going on the bottom. So you're keeping fish in your peg, feeding all of the time. So when it's good, casters are normally the best bait because, again, they make a load of noise, and the fish are just normally so much easier to catch on them. The nice thing about fishing with casters is where you can either fish a banded caster on the hook, but you can fish bits of worm on the hook as well. So sometimes slightly bigger bit, you can alternate, and that's another good hook bait when it comes to fishing with casters. Whereas when the fish are not really feeding very well, with maggots, they sink really quite slow in the water. But when the fish come in the peg and they turn, obviously everything in water is like neutral buoyancy. So when a fish turns, it's turning the water column. So it's like fluttering the maggots up and down all of the time. So it keeps the fish in the peg rooted. The other thing with maggots, obviously because they're live, everything eats them, and they're forever leaving your peg. So that's how I try and break it down. If I'm going somewhere and I'm thinking fishing might be a bit quite difficult, I'll always opt for maggots. If I go there and think it's going to be solid, look at the results, they're catching ridiculous waves, then it's casters all of the way. But in terms of the only time really I'd ever opt for pellets is when the fish are small, when they're young. They just want to eat pellets, a bit like what just happened on the weekend at Gold. My mate next to me fed pellets, caught some, changed casters, stopped getting bites immediately, changed back to pellets, started catching them. But that's not to say that sometimes they don't eat them, because I have my biggest weight, the biggest weight on the middle lake, loose feeding casters, fishing worms on the hook. But that's how I break it down, if that makes sense. So hopefully that helps answer that question. So on to our next question is from Barney Dog. I love that name. Paul, how long a hook length do you use in the edge for, say, carp in 15 to 18 inches, and which hooks do you prefer? Personally, I would opt for a 3 or a 4 inch hook length. Personally, I like a 3 inch hook length because I just like being able to get my bulk nicely, whereas Andy don't mind using a 4 inch hook length for the stretch factor. But for me personally, I like using a 3 inch hook length. I'd use 022 mainline. That I'd be using a muddy, and I would use 018 to a 14 Super LWG or 020 to a 12 Super LWG. I love them hooks personally. You could use an excess spade if you want to, but I personally think the only way you're going to open one of those two hooks is if you foul hook a fish. That's it. So that's what I like using. So hopefully, Barney, that helps answer your question. But personally, for me, 15 to 18 inch, I will be using a 3 inch hook length, 018 or 020, a 14 or a 12 Super LWG. I wouldn't see the point messing around. So hopefully that helps answer your question. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've got 5 questions. So I'm going to quickly do these ones. That way I can let you get on to the rest of your evening. So this one's from Andrew Pearson's. Why do you think fish switch on and off different baits? It can change overnight sometimes. I think it's a bit like us, to be honest. I think they just wise up. And I think it's like anything, you know, I love steak, ribeye steak. Oh my gosh, absolutely dribble over it. Or scallops, lobster, anything like that. Just rich, sweet. I love that type of food. But if I got served it every day, I'd get sick of it. And I think the thing is with the fish is that's what happens. And I think more they get wary when they've been caught on something for a period of time, they can go a bit funny on it. But likewise, again, when something gets fed all of the time, it's normally a safe bet. Hand on heart, I think I think it's more they get caught on it too much. That's genuinely what I think. I think if every time, what I was just saying, like as much as I love steak, if I ate a bit of steak and someone punched me in the head, it'd be pretty quick before I stopped eating steak because I don't really like getting punched in the head. I genuinely think that's probably the easiest way of being able to look at it. I think other baits work at times when they're looking at spawning, maybe when they're, you know, the winter time when they're trying to stock up on fat. So like meat, that can work really, really well. It's obviously high in protein. They love it, you know, and they obviously get, especially for carp, gets their fat resources up, especially like that right big feed up before they sort of shut down. But again, like a big lump of meat in the middle of winter, you know, they'll eat that when they won't eat anything else because of the digestion and things like that. I think sometimes it's a bit like us, you know, like I don't really like water. I've never been a big fan of drinking water, but there's some days when you know, it's like, right, I need a glass of water because like my body's telling me that you've been drinking too much rubbish, Paul. Like you need some water, you need to cleanse your system a little bit. So I get that odd little bit where it's like, oh, I just fancy that, you know. I don't really, but my body's telling me, look, you need to. And I think maybe it's a similar thing with them. You know, maybe they need to eat something to maybe get some stuff out of their system or something. You know, it happens a lot with, you know, like cats and dogs, don't they? They eat grass to sort of make themselves sick or give themselves the runs or whatever, just because they need to clean themselves out. I think there's certain things in fishing which we sort of never really understand. It's just knowing that it does work, you know, and if you get that feeling like they're not really, this ain't really happening, it might be time for a change. And I think history will always repeat itself. So what's worked in the past, you know, sometimes giving again, and this is why sometimes when you go to a different venue and you go and do something that the locals don't, sometimes you can clean up because, like, you know, the fish are a bit like, you know, a bit stupid on this sort of thing. They haven't been caught on this before, and then they wise up to it. So I think, hopefully, Andrew, that answers that question in one way, shape, or form. So on to our next question. It's from Matt Davis. Hi, Paul. What length of hook length do you use for carp on the bomb? It's a brilliant question, Matt. Experiment. That's the one thing I will say. Again, touching on it, I've touched on it in the past, going back a long time now. Craig Meadows, a lad that fished at Gold a lot, a good friend of mine now. He had a long break from fishing, went back to Gold, having, you know, not fished for reasons as such. Obviously didn't know what to do, you know, carp fishing had changed a lot then, and he went in the tackle shop, asked for some help, and then basically said, look, you need a catapult, you need to loose feed some of these pellets and just fish a bomb, and you want a ready tired hook length. So Craig's gone and got some ready tired hook lengths, a bomb, and basically he started winning all the matches, but from areas where you don't win matches from. And when I was going there all of the time, it's like, how has he caught that there? They ain't there. They don't live there. And I'll always remember a match when we was on the far bank. Well, I think it was all around Syndicate, and there was a mistake basically. So it's pegged every other peg. Someone turned up dead late, and they had no option just to chuck a peg in. And as bad luck would have it, Craig drew this peg, and he drew, I'm sure it was about 128, and 127 was in, and 129 was in. So it's literally the worst peg you could have drawn. It's not the best there when it's every other peg, like 120, you know, 121, 122, and opposites, or 117, 116, 115. That's always the areas. That's always where they want to be. You'll always catch fish there. And I was speaking to him before the start, and he's got basically a method feeder hook clamp, 4-inch hook clamp tied to his bomb rig, and with his big snap link swim, obviously a big lead. When I looked at it, I was like, that's horrific. I said to Craig, why are you doing this? And he was like, exactly what I've just told you. He's not long back into fishing, because I was saying, like, you know, you're obviously doing this for a reason. And he said, basically, yeah, that's all I've been doing, just fishing a bomb, loose feeding pellets. That's exactly what Den told me in the show, or what he said the lad in the shop, you know. That's how I've been fishing, sort of thing. So we started our match. I'm just thinking, nah, that, you know, when you look at something, you just think, that can't work. It don't look right. So anyway, we started fishing a match. We've had an odd fish, I think, on a big float, maybe one or two on a feeder, one on a waggler. It weren't great. Looking down, Craig's got another one. Looking down, Craig's got another one. I'm thinking, nah. And at the time, I was fishing a bomb with a 12-inch hook clamp, chucked it out. No bites, no signs, no liners, no nothing. And I'm thinking, look down, he's caught another one. I'm thinking, nah, I can't tie a 4-inch hook clamp. I can't do it. So in the end, I give in and tied literally like 5.5, 6-inch hook clamp. And when I put it up, I was like, nah. So fed my pellets twice, chucked my bomb in it, set my stopwatch, looking at it, thinking, I hadn't had any signs, liners, nothing. There's nothing here. I am not going to get a bite. And then the rod got dragged in. And I ended up catching the rest of my fish on that. Craig won the match. And that's when I knew that no matter where he drew that day, or on a lot of the matches, he weren't going to get beat. And that's the biggest thing, you know. So length of hook length that day, it never, ever, ever leave me that experience. And the length of your hook length can make, and from that is frightening the difference it can make. So what I would say on average when I go to gold, normally a 6 or a 12-inch hook length best for me. When I go to Lindome, when I'm on bonsai, doing a lot of bomb fishing there with 4 mils, sort of an 8-inch hook length tends to work best. But what I would say is experiment, because you would not believe the difference it makes. That's just trial and error. But don't be afraid of putting tiny little hook length on. Like that day, it forever opens your eyes. And that's one thing as well. What is really, really nice, to be honest, is, again, yeah, I feel like if you're a nice person and you help people, when people ask for help, then when it comes for you, you need help, they're more than willing, you know. And what do they always say? 2 heads are better than one. So if there's loads of different people there, and when people are, you know, asking you questions as such, you tell them you already know that, but they will know something one day that you need to know. So hopefully that helps answer that question now. So on to our next questions from Timothy. Love watching you and Andy speak. A lot of sense. Really gets through. That's brilliant, Timothy. I'm glad you're enjoying it. It means a lot to me, that does. So on to our next question. This from Paul. Hi, Paul. Best name ever, isn't it, Paul? It's just easy, isn't it? Hi, Paul. I think these hybrid elastics are better in winter as they don't get affected by the cold. What do you think? Obviously, I spoke about that. I really, really struggled with it in the fact of how it come out of my pole, but that just might mean that I need to find, obviously, a different manufacturer. There might be one in between the 7 and the 9 that I used. And the other thing is I didn't use a lubricant with it, but personally, I preferred me hybrid, me hydro, my pink hydro. That's what I found. But this, when I get back from YA, because now I've got some of the Daiwa stuff, I can go out and do it, because it is noticeably, especially in the lighter diameters, it's noticeably lighter, I would say. But I will try it. I promise I will try it, and I'll do it in a short kit, and I'll do it in a long kit. I'll go on the big lakes and use a long kit, and I'll go on middle lake and I'll use a long kit with a light elastic as well, and I will use a short kit with it in as well, and just see if it works better. But that is something that I will be doing now I've got the elastic pull. So as soon as I get back from the Maver Festival, I know I've got plenty of time then to be able to get it all done for you. So it's definitely something that I will do. So on to our next question. Hi, Paul. How often do you change your main line on your feed and waggler rods? This is something that I think is how many fish you catch. And that's genuinely what I believe. And it's the size of the fish you catch. So at gold, you've got to use a deadline main line, and they go mad. So once you've caught a few, the thing is for me with my waggler line is I want to use £5 because I can use my smallest float and get it just past my bait. Again, when our live match comes out from gold, it will make sense. The float makes a massive mess. I can't stress how important that is. So when it comes to my waggler rods, to be honest, before I started going to gold again, I used my £5 Pulse Pro because I didn't do a lot of it. You know, I was going out, I was doing an odd little bit, and it was perfect for it. But to be honest, it's too nice a line. It's a low stretch, more of a feeder line personally, where you're not stressing, you know, the crap out of it really. A £5 line Pulse Pro really is made for when you're fishing for skimmers, you know, a low stretch line when you'd like to use braid, but you can't use braid, maybe braid's banned, or you want like a really light mono with low stretch. That's what that's made for. I was using it on my waggler and it's not made for that. I'm just wrecking it, to be honest. So I've changed over to my £5 ST, and it's still thin, where it's sort of a grey line like that old Shimano Technium. It just lasts that little bit longer. But personally, when I fish with a waggler, I need to change it a lot regardless. You know, ST lasts a little bit longer than my Pulse Pro, not much longer, but a little bit longer. But then it takes a little bit longer to bed in with me washing up liquid. But it all depends hand on how many fish you're catching when it comes to your waggler and how hard they pull. Obviously, I'm doing a lot of it at the moment, so I'm casting a lot, catching a, you know, fingers crossed, touch wood, we're catching a few fish doing it. So it's never going to last that long, but just keep an eye on it. One thing that I find is a telltale. When I do my figure of 8 knot on my £5 line, when I pull it, when my line's good, I pull it and that's it. It cut my finger off. You know, I physically can't pull it, snap it. When I tie my figure of 8 knot and I pull it and my line snaps, I know for the mid loop to loop, then I have to pull more line out and I keep tying it and I keep tying it, and eventually I tie it and it'll be like, I can't snap that, it's cutting my finger off. But when I get home, them reels, they get re-spooled. When it comes to your feeder rods, again, where I go is gold at the moment. To be fair, wherever I'm going, really, I wouldn't say it's snaggy. You know, some places there's definitely some pegs at gold, peg 5, peg 119, 118. They're really snaggy pegs. So if I drew one of those pegs, my line could literally get wrecked in a match. No matter what line you're using, it just get wrecked because they're ragging it up and down. But I would say normally, like my £8 Pulse Pro, the time I genuinely have to change it is where I haven't got enough line on my spool. So I need to change it, because if I want to chuck a bit further, you know, it's going to be more friction, especially with £8 line coming off my spool. But to be honest, with my feeder line, my £8 Pulse Pro, it doesn't ever really need changing, to be honest. Again, like, test it with a knot, you know, that's a given. But again, like when you rub it, you know, in your mouth sort of thing, because you'll be able to feel any sort of abrasion, any fraying. But I would say feeder line, you know, if it's £8, you don't have to change it very regular. But with your waggler line, especially if it's getting battered a bit, you do have to change that. But for me, what you catch will more than offset, you know, the cost of a smaller line. So, and hopefully when our live match comes out, that will hit home just how important it is, I believe, to make sure that you're using the lightest possible line that's still durable enough. So hopefully that answers your question. So we've got a couple more. So that's from Luke, 018. Is that, yes, tournament rig line. Personally, I like Engage. I spoke about this on our last live. I like Engage for my rigs because it's very, when you pull it, it stretches a hell of a long way. It's very, very supple. The problem is with that, what I find personally, the way I tie my hooks, because I only do like 6 turns, basically that is a copolymer, which is a coated polymer line. Now, when you look at it underneath a microscope, it's perfectly smooth. So when you tie a knot in it, you have to hold it in position for it to, because it's got nothing to sort of bite against, because it's dead smooth, almost like tying fluorocarbon. You have to hold it and then it sort of settles and stays as a knot. Whereas what I think tournament line is, and what Match Winner, Seal Star, and those type of lines, is basically a polymer. So when you look at it underneath a microscope, basically it's not dead. perfect. But when it comes to tying a knot, it actually sort of locks and bites where it's not dead smooth. So personally, for all me hooks, hook lengths, tying a spade end hook or even a knotless knot personally, I like using me tournament rig line for that. And then I use me Engage. And it's basically just because they're two different lines. Engage the copolymer, and I think tournament rig line or match winner Seal Star, they're polymer line. So that's why I use the two different ones, Luke. So hopefully that helps answer your question. So it's from John Lowe. Great session this evening, Paul. Really pleased I managed to log on. Thanks for the help, much appreciated. No problems at all, John. He struggled on the last one and couldn't get on. John's like me, a bit rubbish with technology. So, but I think it's the same for all of us, isn't it? You know, we've got to change, or we get left behind. You know, I'm not the best when it comes to technology, and it's something that I've got to learn. But I genuinely believe doing these lives where, you know, instead of getting your question in as such and then answering it with this, if I answer it and I didn't quite answer it the way you want it to be answered, you know, you can just fire up another question. So I wanted us to be able to do it like this, and say it's going to take me a bit of time to get used to it. Well, look earlier, you know, I was talking to myself for a half hour. I didn't even know. So, you know, we all learn, you know, and it's good, you know. It's just that first one or two. Once we've done it, you know, we'll all get better. And trust me, John, I'm just as bad. Who sits and talks to themselves for half an hour on a laptop without even realising there's a problem? Me. So this next question is from Paul. Are you still doing lessons down at Gold, Paul? I will be, Paul. I've got a list. A pretty long list, to be honest, of people that do want some coaching, and I will be doing some group days. I will do some, but to be honest, hand on heart, with me fishing, and then it's more my match focus. I've got to make sure that my match focus comes first, and I want to try and make it as good as I possibly can. Obviously, with what's going on with match focus, with the VAT side of it, there's all that side of it, and obviously Baz's side of it as well with the match focus side. That I just want to make sure that, you know, we're bang on. You know, we're basically cooking on gas, and I feel like it's getting better and better and better. And there's these live bits and pieces that I want to be doing. I will be doing some. It's just a case of sorting my calendar out, and more importantly, when I feel like, you know what, with match focus, I'm happy with what we're doing and the way we're going about it, then I will start doing a few more. But what I found, to be honest, was what happened with my coaching was I was fishing, filming, coaching, fishing, filming, coaching. That's 1 minute, and then I'm guessing I'll do one more question and then I'll finish this up, because I think it might be a live stream that's a bit too long or something. So, but yes, I will still be doing a few, but it's just got to fit in where it's nicely with match focus. I just found that when I was doing it before, I felt like I was tired, you know, I was doing too much basically, and I want to just make sure our match focus is brilliant. So, but I will do some, Paul, definitely. So our last question is from Bailey Barton. What line diameter and elastic do you use for short pole fishing for big carp? So Bailey, personally, 022 main line, do not mess around. And the one thing that I've learned at Gold is using red hydro. That is ridiculous. I used black, and a few times they just completely see me off. So I changed to red. And again, talking quickly about that elastic choice for the hybrid stuff, it's important that they don't lock you out, you know, and that's what I found with the red. They weren't locking me out, where it's like, and they're still stretching me elastic. So that was something that, to be honest, I was probably, having not done my carp fishing for quite a while, again, a bit late on remembering what I used to fish and what I would think how heavy I used to fish. When I look at red compared to sort of like my white and greys and my short kits that I'm used to using, it's like catapult elastic, but that's what I'd be using. 022 main line. There is no point in losing it, you know. You are not going to get any more bites fishing 017 main line. When they come short, they're there to feed proper durable main line, because otherwise it just ends in disaster, mate. They swim off and it'd be hooked in the mouth and it just break your main line. So 022 main line, no point messing around, and just match your elastic to suit, black, purple, red, depends on how hard they pull. But I wouldn't, no matter what, fish anything less. Even when I'm going to Todd Burr, they're never going to snap me on black hydro. I'm still going to use 022 mainline because I don't want my mainline to snap. So hopefully, Bailey, that helps answer that question. So our last ones, last three, just spot on, Paul. Many thanks for the live. No problems at all, Paul. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Again, from Paul K. Okay, thanks, mate. Keep up the good work, Match Folks. I'm glad you enjoy it. And then the last one is from Powya 3. Thanks, Paul. Great stuff. Cheers. So no problems at all, boys. Hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully I answered your questions as such. Keep an eye out for next month's live. I will start trying to promote it a little bit more so we can all, get on it. But from what started off as a nightmare, me chatting to myself, which I do quite a lot, to be fair anyway. So, but I'm just glad I managed to get it sorted and get it on. So I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you all have a good evening. I hope you all have a good weekend. And I will catch up with you now when I'm down in Whiteacres doing our art match report. So wish me luck. Feel like I'm going to need a bit of luck. But I will see you all very soon. Cheers for watching. Take care.